Hello, everyone, and welcome to Uncivil Law, where we learn through the misfortunes of others. As always, I hope you'll enjoy this legal content, and today will be the day I earn that subscription. For today's story, we are covering the latest ongoings of the January 6th Special Committee in the House, which is set to resume. I thought at 10 o'clock Eastern, but C-SPAN says they're not covering it until 10:30 Eastern. So I'm slightly confused. But we are going to be here and covering it anyway. It's just as well, though, if they don't start until 10:30, because at 10 o'clock Eastern, the United States Supreme Court will drop some decisions, and I don't know. We'll talk about that for 30 minutes if we have to. It may be stuff you don't care about. It may be stuff you care about a lot. But we'll cover it either way because the Supreme Court, hey, why not? It's good for content. Good morning, everyone. Hope you're having a great day here as we are continuing our coverage about the January 6th Capitol riot events, which, as I would like to remind everyone, not that they need necessarily be reminded that this is Congress and therefore this is a political, not necessarily a legal proceeding. Well, I say not necessarily, it's just not. It's a political proceeding. It doesn't involve rules of evidence. I mean, that much we saw very, very clearly last time. It doesn't involve really anything other than what Congress ever wants to invent on the fly. Congress is in charge of its own rules. Each house is in charge of its own rules. And so they can kind of do anything they want within the confines of their territory. And this would be an example of that. So they're having a hearing. The witnesses are under oath, but as we saw last time, it seems to be the House representatives who are doing most of the testifying, not so much with the actual, people supposed to be testifying. So interesting and fun. So we're going to cut all that stuff up. We're going to cover all that up. They had a witness change and a delay. That would be why they're delayed a half hour then. No problem. No problem. The Supreme Court to the rescue. Let's talk about some things happening at the Supreme Court while we are waiting. Let's cover some decisions that have announced recently. So let's see. Yeah, there are 30 decisions supposed to drop, by the way, at the U.S. Supreme Court. That's a lot because the U.S. Supreme Court typically likes to finish by the last day of June. And I don't know if you noticed, but there's not that many days of June left. And the Supreme Court doesn't release opinions every single day. They could, but they just don't. Currently, they have opinions scheduled to be released today and Wednesday, and that's it on the calendar. Next Monday is a holiday. It's Juneteenth, which is now a federal holiday. So next Monday is a holiday. So there won't be opinions on Monday. We're running out of days of June rapidly on the calendar. And we have 30 opinions left to be dropped. That's a lot of opinions in not much time, man. I don't know where the Supreme Court's going to be releasing these opinions. I guess we're going to bleed into July because there's literally not time left on the calendar. But yeah. But that's okay. Let us share what's going on at the Supreme Court. So let me just share this, and we'll speed read some decisions that have dropped recently. And then at 10 o'clock, which is in 15 minutes, we'll cover whatever the Supreme Court's going to be dropping today. It could be the gun case. That would be fun. NYSRPA. It could be the abortion case, Dobbs. Or it could be one of the other 30 decisions that's supposed to come out today. So, we'll go from there. Let's see. I need... Where is my right tab? Am I not in Chrome? Hold on. Why was Kurt's name on the chat recently? I don't understand the question. Am I supposed to understand the question? I'm confused. All right, let's take a look at seeing what happened recently. All right, so let's see. We had opinions last Monday. Let's cover some of those opinions that dropped out last Monday. Probably need to get a producer. Let's see what happened recently. Vikings River Cruises versus Marina. Taurus versus Texas Department of Public Safety. This is in March. Oh, those are still yet to be decided. Egert versus Borrell. Sigurd versus Sauerfeld. Southwestern Airlines versus Saxton. And Geraldo versus Mistal. Let's take a look at some of these cases and see if any of these things are interesting. Well, it's U.S. Supreme Court. It's always a little bit interesting, right? And if you don't agree, you're wrong. When can the Republican Party be held responsible for what? Would be the reasonable question. What are we holding them responsible for? I don't understand the question. Do you mean politically? You can vote against them. Do you mean legally? What did they do legally? Joining us is legal.
Hey,
how are you doing, Legal Vices?
I am doing great. I'm
good.
I'm glad I didn't put that.
Apparently, Congress has decided to be delayed by a half hour. So
maybe they were all watching the Amber Heard interview.
I guess so. And I'm going to watch that because the narrow shot confuses me and bewilders me. We're going to speed cover some Supreme Court cases, and the Supreme Court's dropping some cases in 10 minutes.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Right. So we have things to cover. So I thought, hey, we'd cover some of the decisions that dropped recently and see if we can speed. 4 decisions dropped Monday. So can I do 4 Supreme Court decisions in 10 minutes? Let's find out.
Good luck.
No big deal, right?
That's probably how much time they spend considering.
Oh, that's not fair. You know that.
I'm glad I didn't wear my cowboy hat. That we could have been twinners. That would have been awkward.
No, this is part of my brand now.
Yeah, I just can't do it because I don't have the in ear earbuds with the.
I had to get the
hardwired into
earbuds.
the mic.
I got them so I could wear the hat more. I got them specifically for that reason.
And what brand are you using?
The Shure ones.
Oh, okay.
They're nice.
They made earphones too. All right.
They do.
Cool. Now you got 9 minutes. Sorry.
I'm trying to figure out why I'm not being able to share the right. Am I not in Chrome? I might not be in Chrome. No, I was in Chrome. No, I wasn't in Chrome.
It's a conspiracy.
Look, there are issues. Some of them are mine. Most of them are mine.
Operator error. Well, while you're figuring that, I'm pouring me a handle of vodka.
I'd ask if it's too early in the day, but I know where you live in the world, so you know.
Well, as the great Jay Depp said, it's always happy time, isn't it? It's always happy hour, isn't it?
Always happy hour somewhere. It's 5 o'clock somewhere. I seem to remember a song about that too. All right. All right. So this came down. Wow. You can almost read it. All right. So this came down last Monday. Geraldo versus Mistaler. And we're going to speed read the syllabus. The plaintiff suffered catastrophic injuries resulting in permanent disability when a truck struck her as she stepped off a Florida school bus. Florida Medicaid paid $862,000 to cover the medical expenses. An agency continues to pay. Geraldo, through her parents, sues the truck owner and driver, as well as Lee County School Board. She sought compensation for the medical expenses. future medical expenses, lost earning, and damages. The litigation resulted in a settlement for $800,000 with $35,000 in change, expressly designated as compensation for past medical expenses. The settlement did not specifically allocate any amount for future medical expenses. Okay, so we just have a damages amount. We have $35,000 of which has for past medical expenses, but we are not specifically in the damages otherwise saying what we're compensating. We're just saying it's compensation. So I guess the question we're going to be going to is whether or not we're still entitled to Medicaid payments. That sounds like the logical question, right?
Yeah.
Because if we got full compensation, then presumably we're not entitled to Medicaid. Also, we might owe them money back because we've been compensated and now we can't be double compensated. So we might owe them money and we're not getting paid money is probably where we're going. The Medicaid Act requires participating states to pay for certain needed medical costs and then make reasonable efforts to recoup. That sounds suspiciously like what I just said. Under the Third Party Liability Act, a beneficiary who accepts medical assistance from Medicaid automatically assigns the state any right to third-party medical payments. Okay, so this sounds suspiciously like I sued and I won, but by operation of law, they are now going to take on my award because they are entitled to recoup. So they can just take the award directly, which also works as a legal theory. Okay. The applied to the settlement, the statutory framework entitles the state to $300,000. 37.5% of $800,000, the percentage the statute sets as presumptively representing the portion of tort recovery. Fine. So we say that 37% of the amount awarded is by law an operation assumed to be the amount for past damages. We want that amount. Liquidated damages. This sounds fine. Carrying on. Geraldo challenges the presumptive allocation administrative proceeding. Okay, we're not so thrilled with the presumption and the liquidated damages. We'd like it to be more specifically allocated. So I'm assuming that we think that it's not 37.5%. Which is ironic because in another alternate scenario, it could be the state saying, hey, this presumption is not enough, right? We need more. So you can see the state, it's like it's 37.5% the right amount. Mm-hmm. So they're on the losing end of the stick, so they're suing. In an alternate universe, the state is suing because they're on the wrong end of the stick. Okay. She also brought the lawsuit seeking declaration Florida was violating the Medicare Act by trying to recover portions of the settlement. Mm-hmm. Probably not, but let's see what they say. The Medicare Act permits states to seek reimbursement. That seems fine. Geraldo argues the Medicare anti-lien provisions, which prohibit a state from recovering medical payments for beneficiary property, forecloses recovery for settlement amounts other than allocate. Lame. All right. We have an anti-lien provision. So you can't get a lien against a person's like property, as in their house.
But we're going to say, injured person.
Yeah, but we're going to say, when they said property, they meant all property. No, they're talking about liens. They're talking about real property, you idiot. Yeah. But okay, so no. The court has held it does not apply to state laws authorized by terms of blah, blah, blah. The plain text decides this case. Nothing limits a beneficiary to payments for past medical care. To the contrary, the grant of any rights most naturally covers not only rights for past, but also rights for the future. Statutory reinforcement, blah, 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 blah. The arguments to the contrary that they have different meanings are unconvincing. Geraldo construes the prefatory clause. Oh, that's, you already know you're in for a good time. It's a prefatory clause. Oh, that's definitely going to work. Which provides the purpose of the assignment is to assist the collection of Medicare support payments and other provisions, limits the assignment. But the prefatory clause defines who the third party are owed, does not specify the purpose. Also, it's a prefatory clause. So like the prefatory clause of the Second Amendment or the prefatory clause of the Constitution is not operative. Mm-hmm. So there's also that. They also want to read the assignment provisions to incorporate more limited language of something else, but the court must give effect to Congress's choice to include limitation language in some provisions among not others. Yeah, so Congress, in its infinite wisdom, includes some sort of limitation in some other alternate provision. We'd like to read that limitation all the places. And the Supreme Court says, no, not so much. Congress is entitled to its choices for better or worse, sometimes worse, but that's their job. And we're not going to read whatever they wrote in one place to all the places when it seems like they specifically wrote it in the one place for that reason. Also CF, compare to the rent moratorium issues, where they're trying to read the one provision onto the other provision. The Supreme Court's also like, no, that's not how we do the statutory construction. We also argue it should be interpreted consistently with this other stuff, which I'm sure we should, but we didn't interpret it consistent, blah, blah, blah. Finally, the court's policy arguments, So Thomas issues a supreme in which there's a 7-2. Sounds
like
about right. Sounds about right. How you doing, Nate the lawyer?
Hey, Nate's up.
Hey, what's going on, guys? How you guys doing?
We were speed reading and speed understanding Supreme Court decisions in one of congressional hearings. So
JT's about to drop his decision.
Yes, and it's coming up on 10 o'clock, so it could be any kind of decisions. So what we learned from that case was that, yes, basically, long story short, if you are injured and you're covered by Medicare, Medicaid, or some other federal program, you can apply for those programs and get reimbursement from those programs. And she got reimbursement to the tune of $800,000. Good for her. And then she decided to sue the people that caused the underlying accident. That's also fine. And she got some sort of recovery as a result of that. Fine. Basic principle of law. You're not entitled to double recovery. This is just basic principle 101. You're not entitled to double recovery. So now you have recovery from Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, and you have Medicare from a private thing. Yeah, that's not going to work. So the way the statute or the way the law has tried to address this is by basically saying in so many words, hey, state, who is the one who pays out the Medicare, right? Medicare is a federal program, but it's paid through states. They're the ones that actually pay it out. So it says, hey, state of Florida, you can recover all that money that you paid out as a basically designee. This makes total logical sense. You could do this in a private cause of action without a statute, right? It's basically an indemnification provision. It makes total logical sense. It's like you can seek recovery against them. I paid you out, but they're the one. This is just every insurance claim ever. I get in an automobile accident. I'm insured by Geico. The other guy's insured by State Farm. I get damages. Geico pays me out because I'm covered by them because I have the right kind of insurance for that. Geico now sues State Farm / the other guy to recover, right? I got paid out, so I'm made whole. Geico, however, my insured company has paid out. So now they're injured. So they now assume all that and they go after State Farm / the other guy and they get paid whole. I can't sue the other guy. And if I did, and I won, I just have to fork over the money to Geico because, again, I can't win twice. So that's like basic principle. So it makes total logical sense. And then there's a fight over the finer provisions of the statute and what it says. But basically, the finer provisions of the statute basically conform to everything I just said. You know, they're entitled to recovery. You're entitled to compensation. The state has set some sort of arbitrary line at 35% of the amount of recovery, as we think. You know, we're going to set this as a liquidated damages element, basically, so we don't have to litigate it every time. Fine. The Supreme Court says this is consistent with federal law, which sounds totally fine. So, you know, basically do all those things. Makes perfect logical sense.
Makes sense.
From baseline principles. Yep. And then we could get into why two people disagree, which might be over the finer points to the statute. Or though it sounds suspiciously like from the majority's decision, it sounds suspiciously like the minority is making some sort of policy, you know, kumbaya argument, which is less persuasive than me.
Yeah.
All right, let's see if the Supreme Court wants to issue anything fun and exciting this morning. Will it be Dobbs? Will it be NYSRPA? No, it is some case called Dinesby versus United States. You want to talk or you want to cover?
No, but because I thought the hearings were starting soon.
No, they delayed a half hour.
Oh, because I'm like, what the hell happened? New opinion released. It's not Dobbs or Enas.
Not yet. Maybe later.
That's the New York Rifle Association. What I'm looking forward to. Dobbs. I think Dobbs is not going to be what we think. I think
probably
Dobbs is going to be probably they're going to uphold the law but not overturn.
You think?
I think they're going to uphold the law, moving it back but not overturn Roe. I'm thinking that's probably where they're going with that. Now, I think initially they were going to turn back Roe, but I think the public outrage may have.
I don't know. We'll see how it's going to go. But they typically read these opinions from the bench, which means I've got about 5 or 7 minutes to speed read and speed explain a Supreme Court decision before they release the next one. So we're going to do this. Dinesby versus United States. Okay, an officer with the Federal Bureau of Indian Affairs filed a criminal charge against Dinesby, a member of Navajo Nation. Oh, is this re-examination? Is this re-examining the Oklahoma case from last year? Oh, this could be fun. Oh my God. Okay, fine.
Love the res cases are good.
With 3 crimes that occurred, and assault, battery, terroristic threats, false imprisonment. The complaint was filed in a tribal court, I'm guessing. Yes, which administers justice for Indian courts in certain part of the country where tribal courts have not been established. Oh, okay, so it's even worse than that. It's not even a tribal court. It's basically an ad hoc trial court that we created where trial courts don't exist. How fun and exciting. Dinesby pleaded guilty to the assault and battery and was sentenced to time served. 6 months later, a federal grand jury, is this a double jeopardy thing? This could be a double jeopardy thing. 6 months later, a federal grand jury in Colorado indicted Dinesby on 1 count of aggravated assault in Indian country, an offense covered by the Federal Major Crimes Act. I'm already having nightmares. The Federal Major Crimes Act is basically a provision that applies to Indian, Native Americans in Native American land where if it's of a sufficiently serious crime, that's the major crime, and it's defined in the law, but basically gives it exclusively federal jurisdiction. So even if it's a state offense, if it occurs on Indian land by a member who's a Native American, then it becomes exclusively federal. This is going to be a double jeopardy problem, I can already tell, because we've already had some sort of hearing in this ad hoc tribal court, which I already know is also federal. So this is a double jeopardy issue, I'm pretty sure. Okay, we move to dismiss, arguing double jeopardy. What did I say? It's nice when you get there first. Okay, the double jeopardy does not bar successive prosecutions of distinct offenses arising from a single act, even if a single sovereign prosecutes them. Okay, this could be really interesting depending on where this goes. The normal rule before like 5 seconds ago, and we're going to see if the Supreme Court's about to change this. The rule 5 seconds ago was that you can double jeopardy does not apply if they are distinct crimes. For them to be distinct, they each have to have an element of the crime that is not in the other. So for example, for this purposes, murder and manslaughter are not distinct because murder includes every offense of manslaughter. It just has more stuff. So you need both crimes to have something the other doesn't have. That's why manslaughter and murder are not legally distinct. Murder necessarily implies manslaughter includes all the elements and more stuff. Okay, great. So that's the normal rule for double jeopardy. Although there is a provision, there's also a concept that you can't charge distinct elements arising from a common criminal transaction is the normal phraseology that occurs in law, even where they're distinct. So the idea is like, I don't know, we have a robbery and a murder. They're legally distinct. I'm the prosecutor. I charge you with the robbery. It falls apart. I come again, and now I want to charge you with the murder. Even though they're legally distinct, I can't do that because they're part of the same criminal transaction. Here, also, I have a plea deal or a guilty plea or something relating to this. So the equivalent here would be me pleading guilty or being convicted of the robbery. And now I want to come back and charge you with the murder. Legally distinct, but part of the same criminal transaction. I can't do that for double jeopardy purposes. So that was the rule 10 seconds ago. Let's see if the rules changed in the last 10 seconds. How fun. Okay, the double jeopardy clause of the Fifth Amendment provides no person shall be subject to the same offense twice be put in jeopardy. But it does not prohibit twice putting a person in jeopardy for the same conduct or actions, which sounds suspiciously like we're going to criminal transactions.
Yes.
The focus is on whether they're the same offense, which to be the same offense, it has to include, it means what I just said. All murders are manslaughters, and you have to have some element in both that does not include the other. Okay, offense meant a violation of law. Law is inherent and distinctive feature of law itself. Offense by one sovereign is necessarily different from the offense of another. That's true. The two offenses, therefore, can be prosecuted without offending double jeopardy. Well, if we're separate sovereigns, we're in an entirely different analysis, and I don't need to do all this. The dual sovereignty of principles, yes, I don't need to deal with dual sovereigns. I don't care. I already know the law on that. That was decided like 3 years ago. The single act transgressed two laws, the Mountain Ute Code assault and United States Code. The Mountain Tribe asserted its unique sovereign authority in tribal ordinance. Oh, so we're going to try to say they are separate sovereigns. Okay, let's give that a shot. Likewise, Congress enacted the statute in limiting federal law. They argue double jeopardy applies only when offenses are enacted and enforced by separate sovereigns. That sounds logical. He insists the second prosecution violates double jeopardy because prosecutors in the CFR courts exercise federal authority. That sounds very logical. They need not decide whether prosecutions exert tribal or federal authority, really, because the double jeopardy clause does not prohibit successive prosecutions by the same sovereign. Okay, so we're going to assume they are the same sovereign and that they're successive prosecutions, which now we're back into criminal transaction land. Okay. Rather prohibits for the same offense. Thus, even if Dinesby is right, the clause does not bar the federal government from prosecuting under major crimes. Dinesby stitches loose language together from court precedents to identify prosecuting sovereign under dual sovereignty. No precedent cited by Dinesby involves or mentions unusual situation of sovereign successfully prosecuting. I bet it doesn't. The imprecise statements, blah, blah, blah.
Essentially, essentially, if you commit a murder in New York and it happens to be on a federal property, the federal government could charge you with murder and prosecute you, and the state government could charge you.
If this was the state of New York and the federal government, I'd have no problem. I know the answer to that. That was decided like 3 or 4 years ago with the separate sovereigns thing. So if it's the state of New York and the federal government, no problem. Separate sovereigns all day long. But now we're dealing with a tribal authority, which is federal, and the federal, which is federal. Now, so it sounds like we have the same sovereign, and this also the Supreme Court is also explicitly not deciding whether or not they are separate sovereigns or not for the purposes of this. They're just assuming that they are the same sovereign, which they're not even deciding that, incidentally.
But I think that this is coming from, and the rationale here seems to be that the Indian tribes get their authority from the federal government through that process.
Yeah.
But the state governments actually don't get their authority from the federal government.
Correct.
They actually give authority to the federal government.
Right. Exactly.
This is the switch I think they're making. The federal government gives the authority. It's like the state government giving the power to a city to prosecute. That's essentially what they're saying.
My attempt to speed run Supreme Court decisions continues. The counter arguments are unavailing. The major crime acts to avoid double jeopardy. He asserts limitations on concession. Yep. Argues successive prosecutions does not further the purpose of dual sovereignty doctrine, but we're not even there. Asserts the court conclusion might sovereigns to assume more broad authority to enforce sovereignty to get 2 bites. And this is apparently 1, 2, 3. So this is a 6-3. Now, if my very, very, very quick speed run is correct logically, then this seems to defeat the idea of the same criminal transaction being a principle in double jeopardy law. So it seems like this case is, at least as to the federal government, why wouldn't the logic apply both ways? It seems like it's saying that you can be prosecuted for separate offenses as long as they're distinct, which fine, but that arise from the same criminal transaction. Okay, that seems to be what that's suggesting. We might have to get into that more. Yes, Detective Seeds is joining us for speed reading the Constitution.
Hey, Dobbs' opinion just dropped.
Did it really? Excellent.
Yeah, somebody saying it in the chat. Let me look it up.
What's up, guys?
Hey, what's going on?
We're going to speed read abortion next. That's going to be interesting and fun.
What could possibly go wrong?
What could possibly go wrong as we speed read an abortion decision? No problem. That's just how good I am. I can read, explain, and describe this in under 10 minutes flat, or your pizza's free.
Lionel Hutz there. We win the case or your next pizza's free.
Yeah, nothing yet, though. I can't find anything yet. Somebody saying Dobbs has dropped, but no. I haven't found anything.
Well, I'm gonna disavow this next discussion in advance, even though I'm gonna participate in it.
No, it's not Dobbs. It is a case called ZF Automated versus Luke Share. At least they're trolling you.
Yeah. No, it's your chat. I'm looking at your chat.
Okay, well, they're trolling me.
They're trolling.
They're trolling me. Maybe they're just hopeful. But no, it's not Dobbs. It's some other case, ZF. I know you guys were really interested in the ZF case. No problem. I'm here to provide that too.
I've got my mega pint glass here going.
Oh my God!
I can deal with automotive cases.
I'm going to make a phone call and be back after this one when the hearing comes on. Speed reading these Supreme Court cases.
All right.
I'll be right back.
Wow. Automotives. Awesome.
Yes. ZF Automotives versus Luxshare. That's the one you were all waiting for. Okay, we're involved in an arbitration proceeding, discovery, provision for district court to order production of evidence for use in proceeding in foreign or international tribunal. Oh, it's a foreign arbitration, even more fun. In the first case, Luxshare, a Hong Kong-based company, alleges fraud in sales transaction with ZF Automotive, a Michigan-based automotive parts manufacturer and subsidiary of a German corporation. International law, international arbitrations, exciting. This is what
They are
you
for
really
me.
came
That's what
for.
I do.
Hey, well, good. Well, I'm here to speed read some law that might change your practice. The sales contract signed by the parties provide that all disputes will be resolved by 3 arbitrators under the arbitration rules of the German Institution of Arbitration. Fine. I can probably tell you exactly where this is going without even reading more. My working guess is the Supreme Court is going to say, yes, that's totally fine. Anything they want to do is totally great. We love the arbitrations. They're fantastic. What do they want? Fine. Okay. To prepare for it, ZF filed an application in federal court seeking information from ZF. So we want some sort of discovery. Fine. The district court granted the request, and ZF moves to quash, arguing that the DIS panel is not a foreign or international tribunal. It's not. It's a private entity organized under German law, which is not the same thing, I think. The district court denied the motion. The Sixth Circuit denied the stay. The second case involves okay, so we got a twofer. It's a 2-for-1 case. So that's how much fun you have. It's also Alexi Partners versus Fund for Protection. So this is 2 cases. The second case involves AB Bank, a failed Lithuanian bank, Halada Elita, declared insolvent and nationalized for the Lithuanian authorities. The Fund for Protection of Investor Rights in Foreign States, a Russian corporation, sure, let's bring the Russians into this, assigned the rights of a Russian investor in Snoraz, initiated a proceeding in Lithuania against a bilateral investment treaty. Joy, now we get treaty law into this between Lithuania and Russia. Fun. It just gets more and more exciting with every passing moment. Claiming that Lithuania expropriated the investments. Relevant here, the treaty establishes a procedure for resolving any dispute between one contracting party, investor of another contracting party, in the first contracting party's territory. So it's a choice of law provision. Fine, no problem. And the other offers parties 4 options for dispute. Fine. The fund chose ad hoc arbitration in accordance with the rules. Okay, fine. In initiating the proceeding, the fund filed an application seeking information, blah, blah, blah. They resisted discovery, arguing ad hoc is not a foreign panel. Okay, so I understand the issue. All right, so in both cases, we got
nature of it.
Okay, I understand the issue. In both cases, we've got an arbitration proceeding. In both cases, the arbitration is happening under an international corporation. A corporation, we'll call them an alien corporation because that sounds more exciting. An alien corporation because it's organized under the laws of some other country. Okay, in one case, it appears to be as a matter of contract that they've done this. In the other case, it appears to be kind of the result of a treaty, sort of, that basically says that in the event of a dispute, it's whatever the initiating state is. We got to pick a place. So fine, whoever starts this party, that's fine. And then that country said, okay, here's 4 ways to resolve this, one of which is an arbitration proceeding. So they said, fine, let's do that as a pick. And now we're in an arbitration proceeding. In either case, though, it's ultimately a private arbitration. Even in the case of the treaty, which is saying go to the choice of law, and that country saying, okay, one of the things you can do is arbitration. It is not sufficiently tied to the state, in my opinion, it's not sufficiently tied to the state to constitute a foreign tribunal. It is not the equivalent of some Article 3 court in some foreign land. It is a private entity, and we love the arbitrations. So the Supreme Court is going to rule this is totally fine, and also going to rule that these are not foreign tribunals. Let's find out if I'm right. Now that I've understood the issue. Great. Only the government or intergovernmental adjudicative body constitutes foreign. I am right because I'm just that good. Section provides a district court may order discovery for use in a proceeding. Standing alone, the word tribunal can mean a court. Yes. While a proper version of law covers any judicial proceeding, this is not a judicial proceeding. Later expanded to cover proceedings for a foreign tribunal, which is also a judicial proceeding, just not in our country. And this is still not that. This created the possibility of U.S. judicial assistance in cooperation with other sort of proceedings. Sure, we like the international cooperation. Our country might want to cooperate with their country's proceedings, but this is not their country's proceedings. Foreign tribunal more naturally refers to a tribunal belonging to a foreign nation. Yep, no problem. Similarly, international treaties best understood, or international tribunals, one meaning one or more nations. So it's still an Article 3 court equivalent, but it's just more than one country. Think The Hague. Okay. Section 1782 focuses on government or governmental tribunals. As confirmed by this, extension to private bodies would also be in significant tension with FAA. Yeah, we're not going to do this. If Congress must act, they know how to do this. We're definitely not going to do it for them. There are not governmental proceedings. Yep, no problem. The ad hoc panel presents a harder question. Not for me, it doesn't. I disposed of the issue long ago. A sovereign is on one side of the dispute, and the option to arbitrate is contained in the international treaty rather than private contract. Yet the presence is not sufficient. I told you it's not sufficient enough state action. Booyah. Blah, blah, blah. And it's unanimous. So that was easy. I described the issue, understood the issue, came up with the right result, and the Supreme Court agreed with me unanimously. No problem. What you got next?
The courts love their arbitration. More arbitration, less work they have to do.
Yeah, no, that's easy. That's easy. We could speed read. We could speed read and speed understand Supreme Court decisions, no problem. Give me another one, Supreme Court.
As Justice Uncivil sets people straight.
No problem. Yeah. If they drop Dobbs or drop NYSRPA. I'm not sure I could speed read or speed. Yeah. Well, I know what I think the answer is. Well, even on NYSRPA, I'm not 100% sure. I'm closer on Dobbs because I think Nate is probably wrong. I think they probably do overrule Roe and Casey. And I think
backtrack now.
I don't think they can backtrack now. NYSRPA is interesting only because of how much of scope they want. That's where the interesting. It's like, is it a narrow opinion or is it a broad opinion?
Well, knowing the Supreme Court is ironic.
Yeah, knowing the Supreme Court, it's probably a narrow opinion that's very confined to their facts, which will be very annoying for everybody. But still, it's better than nothing. And it will in absolutely no way prevent Congress. So you can, I guarantee you, if either Dobbs or NYSRPA drops, it will absolutely make an appearance at today's committee hearing. Because how can it not? Someone will fold it in somehow about how the people who are riding, overthrowing the Capitol and abortion/gun control is emblematic, blah, 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 Supreme Court, blah, 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 judicial reform, blah, 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 whatever.
And not that I'm advocating it, but it certainly would be a bit delicate for the panel members that are overseeing these hearings if the left-wingers sort of mobbed and maybe invaded the Supreme Court building.
Who issued that
Congress?
One? That was issued by Barrett. Oh, that's interesting too. Just as a technical matter, because they issue the opinions in reverse order of seniority. And Barrett, of course, is the most junior. So that means this opinion could be coming from anybody if there's more opinions to drop. Just a little, unless the only exception to that is where they have a twin case and the one depends on the other, and then if they need they'll go to the more senior justice if their opinion is the logical underpinning of the other one. But otherwise, they issue it in order of reverse seniority, which gives you a clue as to how many opinions are left and gives you obviously a clue as to how I've been writing it. But of course, since it's Barrett who released it, it could literally be anybody. Maybe it's Barrett again. Maybe it's a day of Barrett. Nothing but Barrett opinions. That'd be good as a theme. I need another opinion, Supreme Court. I'm faster than you guys are. Come on, let's go. Chop, chop. Yeah, I mean, I don't. The problem with backtracking at this point is it makes things very, very untenable, especially for Kavanaugh. It's like if Kavanaugh flips votes, it just is an invitation for people to just keep doing this to him indefinitely.
Well, that's what I was saying is ironic in this because they very well could have. I mean, it being just the first draft could have gone to everybody said, well, wait a minute, we're going way too far with this. We need to back off. But by leaking it and making an issue out of it, they very may well have locked the Supreme Court into issuing that judgment.
We have a third opinion. It's still not either one of those cases. It's a case called Johnson versus Ortega-Martinez, another case I'm sure you guys were waited with bated breath for, but no problem. I'm here to understand the issue, explain the issue, and describe what the Supreme Court did in under 10 minutes flat. Okay, the respondent, Antonio Ortega-Martinez, is a citizen in Mexico who was removed, which is the proper name for it when you are deported, in July 2012 and re-entered the United States, which is a crime after being deported. It's a felony. United States and Customs issued a warrant for arrest. When you do it a second time, it's a felony. ICE reinstated early removal, so they want to deport him again, and detain him pursuant to authority under the Immigration Act. They appeal for withholding of removal under the law, as well as relief under regulations implemented by Convention Against Torture. So we want to claim amnesty. This is a fairly common fact pattern. Based on fear, he'd be prosecuted or tortured if returned to Mexico. An asylum officer determined he had established reasonable fear of prosecution or torture, and Department of Homeland Security referred him for withholding only proceedings before an immigration judge, which is, not nothing. Getting a determination of reasonable fear from an asylum officer is not the easiest thing in the world. So,
especially if it's from a country that's not well known for torturing citizens.
Yeah. After being detained for 4 months, he filed a petition for a writ of habeas corpus in the district court, challenging on both statutory and constitutional grounds his continued detention without a bond hearing. No, this is not going to work because his detention is not in a criminal nature. It's in immigration, which is civil, and also the power of the government when it comes to immigration is immense. The government conceded that they would be entitled to a bond hearing after 6 months based on circuit precedent. Holding a non-citizen facing prolonged detention is entitled to statute to a bond hearing before an immigration judge. I must be released unless the government establishes by clear and convincing evidence non-citizen poses a flight risk. Okay, so there's some case law on point. Fine. We might overturn the case law, though. That's always fun because we're the U.S. Supreme Court. The district court granted relief on statutory claim and ordered the government to provide a bond hearing. The Third Circuit affirmed. At the bond hearing, the administrative judge determined that the flight risk and dangerousness ultimately authorized his repeal. Ooh, this could go in a lot of very interesting directions. Okay, so what do I think? Okay, so here's the issue. We got a guy who has been deported once. He's come in again illegally. On a first offense, it is non-criminal. Second offense, it is criminal. It's a felony. Okay, they are detaining him pursuant to that. He's claiming that he doesn't want to be deported because of torture. Fine. An immigration judge says, okay, I think there's a credible fear, which is not nothing. Now he wants to be bonded out in favor of this. There apparently is some circuit precedent from the Sixth Circuit, which is also a clue for me as I'm about to predict what's about to happen next. The fact that the Sixth Circuit is a clue. For those of you in the know, in the legal community, I just said habeas and Sixth Circuit in the same sentence. This should be a clue. All right, carrying on. There's some precedent in the Sixth Circuit that says, hey, this guy is entitled to a bond hearing because of this relevant law. He sues for it. And according to the precedent, the district court says, yeah, he's entitled to a bond hearing. Here's what's about to happen. The U.S. Supreme Court is about to overrule the circuit precedent. The U.S. Supreme Court is about to say that, yeah, not so much with that. No, the relevant law does not provide for this. Congress has essentially plenary power when it comes to immigration. And so this Sixth Circuit precedent that says the habeas is full of crap. And so not so much with the Sixth Circuit. That is my prediction of where this is going to go. Let's find out if I'm right. Okay. Hell, the relevant law does not require the government to provide non-citizens detained for 6 months with bond hearings.
No bond for me too.
What did I say? What did I say?
I'm with you.
It's easy. It's easy when you read enough of these things. Oh, it's the Sixth Circuit. Oh, it's a habeas decision. Oh, it's about to get overruled. It's the spoilers are easy when you've seen the movie before. The section cannot be required to require hearing proceedings in play, blah, 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 blah. References to flight dangerousness, supports relief ordered below. The companion case, blah, blah, blah. The argues which entails ambiguity, blah, blah, blah. Alien removal, constitutional challenge. Sotomayor delivers the opinion of the court.
Wow.
And Thomas Gorsuch and Breyer dissent. So an interesting 6-3 split. Fun and exciting. Well, that was interesting.
Now what are we going to do for the next 4 minutes?
I don't know.
You're getting too good at this, Kurt.
Well, it's the Sixth Circuit. It's a habeas petition. So I'm like, well, the Sixth Circuit's going to get overruled because the Sixth Circuit getting overruled on habeas is like one of the Supreme Court's favorite things.
Now, what's your ratio for Ninth Circus?
The Ninth Circuit isn't as bad as it was back in the day. It is not as bad back as it was in the day when the Ninth Circuit was getting overruled all the time. These days, the whipping boys of the Supreme Court is Sixth Circuit on the habeas and the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit on the everything, because the Court of Appeals for the Federal Circuit likes to think it's the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court enjoys whacking them around and reminding them that they're not.
Wow.
The Ninth Circuit is still a bit of a whipping boy, but not as much as not as much as they once were. So, yeah.
But hey, we got the 10th Circuit repping today.
How are you doing, Detective Seeds? By the way, good morning.
Doing great. How are you guys doing?
Good, no problem.
Awesome.
Ready to watch this fair and balanced trial?
Fair and balanced. Yes, hearing, proceeding.
Oh yeah, hearing. Yeah.
Yeah. What's day 2 addressing? I forgot that after they listed like the 37th hearing. I forgot what was going to be happening.
They lost me after day 9, so I.
And that opinion was written by Sotomayor, who is what, the 4th most senior?
Man, there's been a lot of turnover.
Let's see. I think that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I think she's 4th in line. So that leaves Roberts, Thomas, and Alito as more senior. Yeah. So we have 3 possible decisions, which means Alito was the one who had written the draft opinion, of course, of Dobbs. And Alito is still up for possible opinions. So will the Alito opinion drop? We'll find out in about 3 minutes. Breyer, that's right. Breyer is still there.
Yeah.
I forgot. Breyer is still there.
Forgettable. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's Roberts, Thomas, Breyer, Alito, and Sotomayor. So she's 5th. So yes, it could be a Breyer. Yeah.
Oh, the tension. You can cut it with a knife.
I love you hear talk so passionately about things regarding law. Yeah, you get to see me geek out hard when I'm doing this kind of shit. Can you tell I enjoy it? When I'm reading it, like, ooh, Supreme Court decision. Ooh, Supreme Court decision. I get to do it. And then when I get the answer right, it makes me feel very good about myself. Which I don't get it right all the time, by the way. I'm surprised by the Supreme Court like everyone else is. So, but it is always nice and feels validating when I do get it right. So I'll take my wins where I can get them.
That's the expertise. You've got it.
Is this about how Batman is evil?
Yeah.
Not yet. But Batman is totally a state actor. I mean, it's not even close. To be a state actor, you just have to show sufficient, basically, entanglement is the phraseology that the courts use with the state. And I mean, they got the bat signal on bat phone. It's a gimme. So yeah, he's a state actor, which means the 4th Amendment applies, which means the suppression hearings relating to the Batman are going to be epic at the case. Which also, like, we're going to have to subpoena the Batman, which means he's not going to show up. So, yeah, we're getting all kinds of shit suppressed.
You're not getting Batman.
He's a menace, Detective Seeds.
He is.
He's a menace to the law. He's a menace to the rule of law.
I like Batman. I'm a fan of Batman. I did get a new chair, so it doesn't sound
excellent.
Like
What'd you go with?
I think it's a X-Vol Sport. My other chair sounded like a mattress in a frat house. Every time I would move, it was like. So my chat, they're like, "You need a new chair." By
the way, in the event that the hearing is going to be starting, just FYI, we're staying here for this. By the way, you're not missing anything. We're continuing to speed read on Supreme Court decisions until they stop. And they're going to be faffing around for a couple minutes of introductions anyway. So yeah, we're continuing with the Supreme Court coverage until it stops, or until I get bored.
What are the chances of you ever getting bored about Supreme Court decisions?
We got a case, Garland versus Alman Gonzalez. I don't know what that is, but we're going to find out and we're going to understand it and explain it to you together. 10 minutes or less, no problem. Let's see. Who is this one written by? Just to do the spoiler. This is written by Alito. So that means, well, I don't know. That means, well, we're not getting one from Sotomayor again. It means that, but it doesn't mean necessarily it's the only Alito opinion. We could have more. There's no rule against them having more than one the same day. That'd be funny if, like, they did theme days. Today is nothing but Alito opinions.
It's Alito Day.
It's Alito Day. Yeah, I don't really do that. All right. So Garland, in his capacity as the Attorney General, versus Alman Gonzalez. All right. Respondents are aliens, which is what we call it when you're not a citizen, who are detained by the federal government pursuant to the INS. to immigration law. Respondents are natives and citizens of Mexico, again within Mexico, after re-entering illegally. Didn't we just decide this? Oh, this is from the Ninth Circuit, though. Okay, so this is okay. So I'm thinking the conclusion of this may conform to the one we just read 5 seconds ago. They filed a putative class action alleging the aliens detained or entitled to bond hearings after 6 months of detention. This sounds suspiciously similar. This is a different case, right? Yeah, okay. They clarified the class of similar situated plaintiffs and enjoined from detaining. Divided panel of the Ninth Circuit affirmed. Respondent in the case bears his name, is a native of El Salvador, re-entered the country, blah, blah, blah. The section of the law deprived the district courts of jurisdiction entertain requests for class-wide injunctive relief. Okay, so this could be interesting, depending on where this is going, because this could be either statutory in its nature, or it could be a little bit more global, because there's this whole controversy over these ideas of universal injunctions, global injunctions. They go by a whole bunch of names. Basically, where a district court or a court of appeals issues an injunction that applies nationwide, there are really no rules for this. And it's a little weird when you have one of the random 94 district courts issue a rule that suddenly applies in the entire nation. So this could be interesting for the tea leaves aspect of, or maybe just a decision on the aspect of this global jurisdiction, depending on where they're going. That would be the only reason to write this. Otherwise, it's just basically just see what we just said. So let's see if they want to like opine onto this issue, which is perhaps more interesting. Generally strips lower courts of jurisdiction to enjoin or restrain certain provisions of the law. The ordinary meaning of enjoin and restrain bars class-wide action. When a court enjoins contracts and issues an injunction, that is exactly what enjoin means. So yeah, the law strips the courts of the authority to enjoin. We issued an injunction. Do you see where the problem is? Yeah. Okay, the court has suggested that restrain sometimes has a broad meaning that refers to judicial orders that inhibit actions, and other times has a narrow meaning that includes order to stop. Both of which sound suspiciously like injunction to me. But who am I? Putting the terms together generally prohibits the lower court from maintaining injunctions that order officials to take or refrain. Includes one exception: the lower courts retain authority to enjoin or restrain relevant. And again, also, by the way, for what it's worth, this again is in the immigration context. So the relevant statute strips the courts of the authority to enjoin in relation to immigration, which is a notable factor in this equation, because the fact is immigration means Congress has more power than it would otherwise. There is a concept that Congress's power may be absolute and unquestionable when it comes to the border. At least you have to have the discussion, okay? Other provisions of the Constitution may not apply when it comes to the border, okay? It's how deep we're willing to go on these concepts. So when Congress is dealing with something at the border, their power is wider and more absolute than it would be just about anywhere else. So if this were just about anything else, we'd have to have a discussion about the fact that Congress is stripping the courts of their power to enjoin. But it's immigration, though. And again, Congress's power is pretty damn near absolute. So that's kind of important before we overread this into other contexts. Anyways, it stated that it prohibits the federal courts from granting class-wide injunctive reliefs, but does not extend to individual cases. Here, both district courts entered injunctions to provide bond hearings not only for respondents, but other class members. So, okay, so there's some exception that applies as it relates to individuals. Fine, but it strips it of class authority. They want to do a class thing. That just seems like a total non-starter. There's some counter arguments, blah, blah, blah. As the provisions are properly interpreted, they bar class-wide injunctions that prohibit the government from doing what the statute. Yep. The ordinary meaning weighs against it. Yep. It's very common to refer to unlawful or improper operation of something. It's not apparent why it cannot be said of a statute. Yeah. They next argue class-wide relief so long as class members are all individuals. That is some bullocks. That is some grade A bullocks. Oh, yeah, we can have class-wide things because every member of the class is an individual, and we're allowed individual relief. Total non-starter. Total legal fail. Total absolute legal fail. Just go home. get out of my court with this weak sauce. It refers to individual, not individuals. Even if it referred to individuals plural, I still wouldn't give you the interpretation. I'm sorry. No. Okay. Alito issues an opinion in which Sotomayor dissents in part, and Kagan and Breyer also dissent in part. So it's quasi-unanimous, which makes total logical sense because this is just straight statutory construction, right? It's an act of Congress, and it deals specifically in immigration. That means we're in nigh absolute plenary, even the Constitution may not apply territory. And yeah, so we're just going to interpret the statute. It strips it of the ability to issue class actions. They want to issue class actions, but we're all individuals in the class. Go away.
How does that even get cert?
Well, it gets
unless
cert
they just wanted to say, don't ever do this again.
No, it gets cert because the Ninth Circuit went the other way and can't read.
Because it's the Ninth Circuit. I forgot about that part.
Can't read.
As I said the other day, that's why we call it the Ninth Circuit.
Because the Ninth Circuit is full of hippies who have feelings about the immigration and the immigrants and the poor plight of the immigrants. And they're like, well, this is sad, and we want to fix the sadness. And the Supreme Court's like, well, no, I'm sorry. Congress has basically nigh on absolute power, and they said not so much. So I'm sorry you're sad and all, but no. And even again, because it's the border, we can just dispense with basically other arguments, like how about the equity? How about basic principles? It's like, no. When you have a congressional statute on point on the border, no. The reason that for example, Bush or Trump got into issues with immigration orders is because their orders exceeded statutory authority. If you're wondering why Trump's executive orders relating to bans of certain people, why they had problems, though they were ultimately upheld. The reason is because his orders didn't conform to the statute. That was the problem, right? Eventually, they did conform to the statute, right? So when we're trying to overrule Trump, it's because Congress didn't authorize it, which, the president can only do what Congress authorizes. So easy enough. But when Congress authorizes it, when you have a statute on point and it's immigration, good luck. Good luck. I've commented before just to show you how absolute the power of Congress might be at the border. If you had a statute, and there is no such statute, just for the record, but if you had a statute and Congress literally passed a law that says no person of the Muslim faith can enter our country or become a citizen of the United States, this law does not exist. But if it did, and you said, but the First Amendment, you'd actually have to think about it because of how absolute Congress's power is at the border. Even but the First Amendment, though, but it's the border. And this goes into, and the reason why in case you're curious as to why, is because it goes to the fundamental concepts of what countries are. Mm-hmm. All right. One of the fundamental concepts of what a country includes borders and the ability to protect them. What comes in and out of your borders is one of the fundamental conceits of the concept of countries. So when Congress is acting at the border, its power is basically nigh on absolute. The only counter consider, if you're dealing with a U.S. citizen, then at least you have the citizens protected by constitutional powers, constitutional rights. But even then, you have issues. The only thing that they probably can't do to the citizen is exclude him completely. They can't deport a citizen because that doesn't make any sense. But in terms of searching the citizen, in terms of searching his things, if they want to search your laptop or search your cell phone, all those cases Jones and privacy things, just at the border, everything just goes to hell because the power is so strong when there is a congressional statute that authorizes it. So there's your legal factoid information for the day. So what else do you got for me, Supreme Court? There's one more. Wow. Kemp from the United States is the last one of the day. It looks like. So 5. Yes. So we have the last one, and then we'll go to the congressional hearings, which I know is what you all really came for. But we're speed reading Supreme Court decisions because it entertains me, and I want to have some happiness in my day. This makes me happy. Okay. So hold on, stop screen, share screen, Chrome tab, Kemp v. United States. Let's speed read Kemp and see what it has to teach us. And then we'll go to Congress bloviating about whatever they're bloviating about. Okay, this is Kemp versus United States. Detective Kemp and his seven co-defendants were convicted of various drug and gun crimes. Not great. Don't do the drug crimes. The 11th
Especially
Circuit,
if you're a detective.
Yeah, yeah. The 11th Circuit consolidated their appeal and affirmed convictions and sentences. In 2015, moved to vacate his sentence. The district court dismissed the motion as untimely. Okay, so this is some sort of habeas effective death penalty case. The Effective Death Penalty Act, by the way, deals with things that are not just death penalty. I understand this is not a death penalty case, but the Effective Death Penalty Act deals with things beyond that. It's a global law that deals with habeas. That's why I mention it. Okay, the district court dismissed as untimely because it blah, blah, blah. They did not appeal. Well, that's going to be a real problem. Then they sought to reopen proceedings under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure, which authorizes the court to reopen final judgment under certain enumerated circumstances. So they probably didn't. They're going to argue abuse of discretion, and the Supreme Court is going to say no. It's probably where this is going. As relevant here, a party may seek relief within 1 year based on mistake, inadvertent, surprise, or excusable neglect. Yeah, no, the district court is about to say no. He's going to appeal on abuse of discretion. The Supreme Court is about to say, get out of here. I'm pretty sure this is where this is going. Kemp's motion to involved mistake. Good luck. He argued the 1 year limitation did not run until his co-defendants' hearing petitions were denied. The 11th Circuit agreed with Kemp. It was timely, but concluded because Kemp alleged judicial mistake. His rule fell under this rule and was subject to the 1 year limitation, was therefore, yeah. I'm going to guess the Supreme Court's going to say, yeah, get lost. The term mistake includes judicial errors of law because the motion alleged such error. It was cognizable and untimely. What did I just tell you? What did I just tell you? It's nice when you're able to get there in advance. I'm like, yeah, no, okay. No, good luck. No. What was the split on this one? Thomas issues it with Gorsuch in dissent, which I might read that more interesting because Gorsuch is my boy. Holla. So we might read some Gorsuch later. But for the moment, we are going to go and do what you guys actually came for, which is listen to Congress. I know it's disappointing, but, that's what we have to do now.
Well, you had a perfect record today.
Yeah, it's nice. 5 for 5 at Supreme Court law and uncivil law territory. All right, let's listen to whatever this is. All right, Lord have mercy. Oh, good news. We didn't miss anything. We missed nothing. The hearing hasn't started yet. We missed nothing. Wow. Good news. Well, joy. I'm happy I was able to this has been a great day of legal education. I get you 5 Supreme Court decisions with explanations and analysis, and the hearing still hasn't started, man. By the way, if you would like to support this channel for its legal analysis, we do encourage you to hit that subscribe button. If the red subscribe button is red, please hit it. I give good legal analysis. Please hit the subscribe button. It helps the channel grow. Thank you.
He's the next Supreme Court justice. He's obviously far more qualified than a lot of people on the bench because he's out-thunked them already. He doesn't need to hear the arguments. Oh, here we go.
We missed literally nothing. Joy. Good news. This is the best news ever. We didn't miss any of the hearing. I'm so excited. We didn't miss any of the hearing.
That just tells you that Congress doesn't give a shit about people. We'll start when we want to start. We don't have to keep the times. They're better than us in their own minds.
What is that? 6 decisions, or was that 7? Because there were 5 opinions, but one of which was consolidated. So I think it was 6 opinions.
Well, we'll call it 6.
So 6 opinions down, 24 to go. Yeah.
January 6th.
January 6th. Unfortunately for our members of Congress, they don't get to give today, at least, a bloviating speech about how January 6th ties in to either Dobbs or NYSRPA. I know they're sad.
The Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol will be in order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare the committee in recess at any point. Pursuant to House Deposition Authority Regulation 10, the chair announces the committee's approval to release the deposition material presented during today's hearing. Good morning. Last week, the Select Committee laid out a preview of our initial findings about the conspiracy overseen and directed by Donald Trump to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election and block the transfer of power, a scheme unprecedented in American history. My colleagues and I don't want to spend time talking about ourselves during these hearings.
You don't?
But as someone who's run for office a few times,
I don't want to talk about myself, but as someone who's run for
at the end
office,
of a campaign, it all comes down to the numbers. The numbers tell you the winner and the loser. For the most part, the numbers don't lie. But if something doesn't add up with the numbers, you go to court to get resolution. And that's the end of the line. We accept those results. That's
do you
what
though?
It means to respect
Do you?
the rule of law.
You yourself
That's what it
challenged
means to
votes
seek elective
in
office
Congress,
in our
electoral
democracy.
votes. Really?
Because those numbers
really
aren't
is the end of the
just
line?
numbers, they're votes.
Well,
They're your votes. They are the will and the voice.
I'm sorry, that
of
brings
the
us to the
people.
end of our proceedings
And the
because
very
I had an
least we should
unspoken bet
expect
that
from
the
any
hearings would
person
stop
seeking a
as soon as
position
Congress told a
of
lie.
Public trust.
And unfortunately, that's a
is
lie.
the acceptance
So that brings us to
Kurt.
the end of our hearings.
Win or lose. Donald Trump didn't. He didn't have the numbers. He went to court. He still didn't have the numbers. He lost. But he betrayed the trust of the American people. He ignored the will of the voters. He lied to his supporters and the country.
Oh, well,
And
God forbid a
in
congressman
office
would lie
after
to
the
their
people had
constituents.
voted him out, and the courts upheld the will of the people. This morning, we'll tell the story of how Donald Trump lost an election and knew he lost an election, and as a result of his loss, decided to wage an attack on our democracy, an attack on the American people by trying to rob you of your voice in our democracy. And in doing so, lit the fuse that led to the horrific violence of January 6th, when a mob of his supporters stormed the Capitol sent by Donald Trump to stop the transfer of power. Today, my colleague from California, Ms. Lofgren, and our witnesses will detail the Select Committee's findings on these matters. But first, I will recognize our distinguished Vice Chair, Ms. Cheney of Wyoming, for any opening statement she'd care to offer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Last week, as the chairman noted, our committee began outlining a 7-part plan overseen by President Trump to overturn the 2020 election. Today, we will begin looking at the initial part of that plan. President Trump's effort to convince millions of Americans that the election was stolen from him by overwhelming fraud. A federal court has already reviewed elements of the committee's evidence on this point and said this, quote, "In the months following the election, numerous credible sources from the president's inner circle to agency leadership and statisticians informed President Trump and Dr. Eastman that there was no evidence of election fraud," close quote, sufficient to overturn the 2020 presidential election. The court's opinion methodically documents each of the principal reasons for that conclusion, and I would urge all those watching to read it. Today, we will begin to show the American people some of our evidence. Today, you will hear much more from a former Attorney General Bill Barr's recorded testimony, and you will hear in greater detail what others in the department told President Trump, that his claims of election fraud were nonsense. You will also hear much more from President Trump's own campaign experts, who had also concluded that his fraud claims could not be supported. Let me focus briefly on just 3 points now. First, you will hear firsthand testimony that the president's campaign advisors urged him to await the counting of votes and not to declare victory on election night. The president understood even before the election that many more Biden voters had voted by mail because President Trump ignored the advice of his campaign experts and told his supporters only to vote in person. Donald Trump knew before the election that the counting of those mail-in ballots in several states would not begin until late in the day and would not be complete for multiple days. This was expected, reported, and widely known. You will also hear testimony that President Trump rejected the advice of his campaign experts on election night and instead followed the course recommended by an apparently inebriated Rudy Giuliani to just claim he won and insist that the vote counting stop, to falsely claim everything was fraudulent. He falsely told the American people that the election was not legitimate. In his words, quote, a major fraud. Millions of
Paging hanging
Americans
Chad.
believed him.
White courtesy phone, please. Hanging
Second,
Chads.
pay attention to what Donald Trump and his legal team said repeatedly about Dominion voting machines. Far-flung conspiracies with a deceased Venezuelan communist allegedly pulling the strings. This was, quote, complete nonsense, as Bill Barr said. President Trump's own campaign advisors, his Department of Justice, and his cybersecurity experts all told him the same thing. Here, for example, is White House lawyer Eric Hirschman. His view was shared by many of the Trump team whom we interviewed.
I thought the Dominion stuff was, I never saw any evidence whatsoever to sustain those allegations.
And third, as Mike Pence's staff started to get a sense for what Donald Trump had planned for January 6th, they called the campaign experts to give them a briefing on election fraud and all the other election claims. On January 2nd, the general counsel of the Trump campaign, Matthew Morgan, this is the campaign's chief lawyer, summarized what the campaign had concluded weeks earlier, that none of the arguments about fraud or anything else could actually change the outcome of the election.
Generally discussed on that topic was whether the fraud, maladministration, abuse, or irregularities, if aggregated and read most favorably to the campaign, would that be outcome determinative? And I think everyone's assessment in the room, at least amongst the staff, Mark Short, myself, and Greg Jacob, was that it was not sufficient to be outcome determinative.
As is obvious, this was before the attack on the Capitol. The Trump campaign legal team knew there was no legitimate argument, fraud, irregularities, or anything to overturn the election. And yet President Trump went ahead with his plans for January 6th anyway. Mr. Chairman, hundreds of our countrymen have faced criminal charges. Many are serving criminal sentences because they believed what Donald Trump said about the election and they acted on it. They came to Washington, D.C. at his request. They marched on the Capitol at his request. And hundreds of them besieged and invaded the building at the heart of our constitutional republic. As one conservative editorial board put it recently, quote, Mr. Trump betrayed his supporters by conning them on January 6th, and he is still doing it. Another conservative editorial board that has long supported President Trump said last week, Donald Trump, quote, won't stop insisting that 2020 was stolen, even though he has offered no proof that that is true. And this, Donald Trump now, quote, clings to more fantastical theories, such as Dinesh D'Souza's debunked 2,000 mules, even as recounts in Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin confirm Trump lost. Those are the correct conclusions to draw from the evidence gathered by this committee. We have much more evidence to show the American people on this point than we can reasonably show in one hearing. But today,
that's good because we have like 7 more of them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Oh, it's like listening to a computer-generated monotone voice.
It's like getting a prostate check from Wolverine.
From California, Ms. Lofgren, for an opening statement.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. In our opening hearing, we gave an overview of our investigation into the January 6th attack. The plot to overthrow the election was complex and had many parts, which we'll explore in remaining hearings. But today, we examine the false narrative that the 2020 election was, quote, stolen. Former President Trump's plan to overturn the election relied on a sustained effort to deceive millions of Americans with knowingly false claims of election fraud. All elements of the plot relied on convincing his supporters about these false claims. Today, we'll demonstrate the 2020 election was not stolen. The American people elected President Joe Biden. We'll present evidence that Mr. Trump's claims of election fraud were false, that he and his closest advisors knew those claims were false, but they continued to peddle them anyway, right up until the moments before a mob of Trump supporters attacked the Capitol. We'll also show that the Trump campaign used these false claims of election fraud to raise hundreds of millions of dollars from supporters who were told their donations were for the legal fight in the courts. But the Trump campaign didn't use the money for that. The big lie was also a big ripoff. The former president laid the groundwork for these false claims well in advance of the election. As early as April 2020, Mr. Trump claimed that the only way he could lose an election would be as a result of fraud.
You know the things with bundling and all of the things that are happening with votes by mail, where thousands of votes are gathered, and I'm not going to say which party does it, but thousands of votes are gathered and they come in and they're dumped in a location, and then all of a sudden you lose elections that you think you're going to win.
The only way we're going to lose this election is if the election is rigged. Remember that. It's the only way we're going to lose this election.
This is going to be a fraud like you've never seen. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well.
Mr. Trump decided even before the election that regardless of the facts and the truth, if he lost the election, he would claim it was rigged. Mr. Trump was right about one thing. It did not end well. On election night, Mr. Trump claimed even before the votes were counted that his loss was a result of fraud. Now, Thursday, we had testimony from Attorney General Barr about the Department of Justice investigation of Mr. Trump's fraud claims. Barr told Trump directly that his claims were BS. Yet, after hearing the truth and that warning from the AG, Mr. Trump continued to peddle the false claims of fraud. You'll hear detailed testimony from Attorney General Barr describing the various election fraud claims the Department of Justice investigated. He'll tell you how he told Mr. Trump repeatedly that there was no merit to those claims. Mr. Barr will tell us that Mr. Trump's election night claims of fraud were made without regard to the truth and before it was even possible to look for evidence of fraud. Attorney General Barr wasn't alone. You'll see and hear today other Department of Justice officials and senior advisors to Mr. Trump that they told him the claims he was making were not supported by evidence. The election fraud claims were false. Mr. Trump's closest advisors knew it. Mr. Trump knew it. That didn't stop him from pushing the false claims and urging his supporters to, quote, fight like hell, to, quote, take back their country.
I've heard
After
rhetoric from politicians of both
various
sides.
Legal challenges were made. You'll hear testimony today from a renowned Republican election litigation lawyer who will explain the normal process by which candidates challenge an election. Rather than accept the results of the election and the decisions of the courts, Mr. Trump pursued a different strategy. He tried to convince the American people the election had been stolen. Many of his supporters believed him, and many still believe him today. The attack on January 6th was a direct and predictable result of Mr. Trump's decision to use false claims of election fraud to overturn the election and to cling to power. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. I now welcome our first witness. We're joined today by former Fox News politics editor Chris Skywalker. Bill Stepien,
Chris
President
Skywalker?
Trump's former
What?
campaign manager, was subpoenaed to be here and was in Washington this morning, prepared to testify. Kevin Marino, Mr. Stepien's attorney, is here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Marino, for coming. And he has advised us that Mr. Stepien's wife went into labor this morning. Mr. Stepien unexpectedly had to travel to be with his wife, and we wish him the best. Due to the depth and rigor of our investigation, we have several hours of Mr. Stepien's testimony from when we interviewed him in February, and we will be presenting that testimony today.
Oh God, several
I'll now
hours.
swear in our witness. The witness will please stand and raise his right hand.
Now we're more than a day into this, and I
Swear
still find myself
affirm
saying,
under penalty
so
of
where's the
perjury
illegal?
that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help
last
you
week
God.
they just asked leading questions, and he pretty
Thank
much
you.
told them the answers.
You may be seated.
Yeah.
Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative. I now recognize myself for questions. I want to start by showing a video that tells the story of what was going on in the Trump White House.
I'll just
on
show a
election
video that
night
just
in November
tells you
of
all the
2020.
answers to the questions.
I hope it's one of those like Taiwanese accident
where you were on the
recreation,
night of the
like
election,
animation
November
videos.
the 3rd?
I was at the White House.
You know where specifically over the course of that night you spent your time within the White House?
There was an event that was organized in the residence, so I moved between the residence, a room sort of off the residence where some family members were.
I take it the president was upstairs in the residence.
He was upstairs. We were kind of on the first floor, so not upstairs. We were with, mostly with Ivanka and her brothers and a couple other people who'd be coming in and out.
Can you just describe the atmosphere? What were people expecting that night when you got to the White House?
I think that there was, typically for people who show up there on election night, it's going to be a self-select, more positive environment. I think people were a little bit nervous, not knowing what was going to happen with the red wave or the red mirage as the debate was being carried out.
The Fox News Decision Desk is calling Arizona for Joe Biden. That is a big get for the Biden campaign.
Arizona's called. Do you remember that?
I do.
What do you remember happening where you were when Arizona was called?
There was surprise at the call.
Who was surprised?
Most everyone in the room.
Were you being one of them?
Yes.
Did that shift the atmosphere or the attitude in the White House?
Completely.
How so? Can you describe that?
Because Fox News was the first one to go out and say that.
So was it anger kind of directed towards Fox News for making a call more so than like disappointment that maybe the campaign lost Arizona?
All the above.
So both anger and disappointment.
Both disappointed with Fox and concerned that maybe our data or our numbers weren't accurate.
Were you in the White House residence during the sort of past midnight into the early morning hours of November 4th?
Yes, oh sure. It went over beyond midnight, yes.
Do you remember Rudy Giuliani being at the White House on election night and into the early hours the next morning?
I do.
What do you remember about when he came?
He was, I had heard that he was upstairs, in that aforementioned reception area. And he was looking to talk to the president. And it was suggested instead that he come talk to several of us down off the map room.
You said that you had heard that Mr. Giuliani wanted to talk to the president and then he was directed your way. Did you end up talking to Mr. Giuliani when he was directed your way?
I did.
What was that conversation?
A lot of conversations were directed my way.
Was his speech slurred?
A few of us, myself, Jason Miller, Justin Clark, and Mark Meadows, gathered in a room off the map room to listen to whatever Rudy presumably wanted to say to the president.
Was there anyone in that conversation who, in your observation, had too much to drink?
Mayor Giuliani.
Tell me more about that. What was your observation about his potential intoxication during that discussion about what the president should say when he's addressed the nation on election night?
And the mayor was definitely intoxicated, but I do not know his level of intoxication when he spoke.
Did you take his breathalyzer? Can you tell us his BAC
discussions with the people I mentioned, Mr. Stepien, Mr. Meadows, or anyone else, about whether the president should make any sort of speech on election night?
I mean, I spoke to the president. They may have been present, but President spoke to the president several times that night.
There were suggestions by
Bain has really let himself
Giuliani
go
to
here.
declare victory and say that we won it outright.
It was far too early to be making any calls like that. Ballots were still being counted. Ballots were still going to be counted for days. And it was far too early to be making any proclamation like that.
I remember saying that, to the best of my memory, I was saying that we should not go and declare victory until we had a better sense of the numbers.
Okay, can you be more specific about that conversation, in particular what Mayor Giuliani said, your response, and then anybody else in the room's response?
I think effectively Mayor Giuliani was saying, we won it. They're stealing it from us. Where'd all the votes come from? We need to go say that we won. And essentially that anyone who didn't agree with that position was being weak.
What was your view at the time as to what he should or shouldn't say?
I don't know that I had a firm view as to what he should say in that circumstance. The results were still being counted. It was becoming clear that the race would not be called on election night.
My belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but you know, we proud of the race we ran, and we, you know, think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this, you know, the next day or the next day, whenever we had something to say.
And did anybody who was a part of that conversation disagree with your message?
Yes.
Who was that?
The president disagreed with that. I don't recall the particular words. He thought I was wrong. He told me so, and you know, that they were gonna, you know, go in he was gonna go in a different direction.
This is a fraud on the American public. This is an embarrassment to our country. We were getting ready to win this election. Frankly, we did win this election. We did win this election.
Mr. Steinwart, did President Trump have any basis to declare victory on November 4th, 2020?
Other than the First
Thank
Amendment.
you. Mr. Stepien also
On November
testified
4th?
that President Trump had no basis for declaring victory at that point in time.
my belief, my recommendation was to say that votes were still being counted. It's too early to tell, too early to call the race, but we proud of the race we ran, and we think we're in good position, and we'll have more to say about this the next day or the next day, whenever we had something to say.
Thank you. Mr. Stilwell, after the votes were counted, who won the presidential election of 2020?
Joseph Robinette Biden Jr. of the great state of Delaware.
Thank you. That's the bottom line. We've had an election. Mr. Trump lost, but he refused to accept the results of the democratic process. Pursuant to Section 5C8 of House Resolution 503, I now recognize the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for questions.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Stilwell, I'd like you to explain a term that was thrown around a lot during the election, and that's the so-called red mirage. What does that mean?
So in the 40 or 50 years, let's say, that Americans have increasingly chosen to vote by mail or early or absentee, Democrats prefer that method of voting more than Republicans do. So basically, in every election, Republicans win election day and Democrats win the early vote. And then you wait and start counting, and it depends on which ones you count first, but usually it's election day votes that get counted first. And you see the Republicans shoot ahead, and then the process of bailing and binding and unbinding all those mail-in votes. In some states like Pennsylvania refuse to count the votes first, so you have to wait for all of that to come in. So in every election, and certainly a national election, you expect to see the Republican with a lead, but it's not really a lead. When you put together a jigsaw puzzle, it doesn't matter which piece you put in first. It ends up with the same image. So for us, who cares? But that's because no candidate had ever tried to avail themselves of this quirk in the election counting system. We had gone to pains, and I'm proud of the pains we went to make sure that we were informing viewers that this was going to happen, because the Trump campaign and the president had made it clear that they were going to try to exploit this anomaly. And we knew it was going to be bigger because the percentage of early votes was higher, right? We went from about 45% of the votes being early and absentee to, because of the pandemic, that increased by about 50%. So we knew it would be longer, we knew it would be more. So we wanted to keep telling viewers, hey, look, the number that you see here is sort of irrelevant because it's only a small percentage of these votes.
So this red mirage, that's really what you expected to happen on election night.
Happens every time.
Thank you, Mr. Stilwell. Now, I'd like to play a clip of Attorney General Bill Barr, who also explains what was expected to happen on election night.
Right out of the box on election night, the president claimed that there was major fraud underway. I mean, this happened, as far as I could tell, before there was actually any potential of looking at evidence. And it seemed to be based on the dynamic that at the end of the evening, a lot of Democratic votes came in, which changed the vote counts in certain states. And that seemed to be the basis for this broad claim that there was major fraud. And I didn't think much of that because people had been talking for weeks and everyone understood for weeks that that was going to be what happened on election night.
Mr. Stepien obviously could not be with us today, and it's proper for him to be with his wife as they welcome their child. But he also had discussions with the president about the red mirage. That is, that it would be a long night and that early votes would favor him, but that lots more votes would be counted over the course of the night and the days after. So let's play clip 1 from our interview with Mr. Stepien.
I recounted back to that conversation with him, in which I said, just like I said in 2016, was going to be a long night I told him in 2020 that, it was going to be a process again, as, the early returns are going to be, positive, and we're going to, be watching the returns of ballots as, they rolled in thereafter.
So is it fair to say you're trying to present what you thought would be a realistic picture of what might happen over the course of that night, being election night?
That night and the days that followed. Yeah, I always told the president the truth, and I think he expected that from me, and I told him it was going to be a process. It was going to be, we're going to have to wait and see how this turned out. So I just like I did in 2016, I did the same thing in 2020.
So let's watch a short clip of President Trump speaking after he received that information from his campaign advisors.
We want all voting to stop. We don't want them to find any ballots at 4 o'clock in the morning and add them to the list.
So when former President Trump said that, it contradicted what his advisors had warned would happen. We all know that mail-in ballots played an important role in the 2020 election. However, President Trump continuously discouraged mail-in voting. Mr. Stepien was so concerned about the president's position on mail-in voting that in the summer of 2020, he met with President Trump along with House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. Let's play clip 4.
Meeting that was had, in particular, I invited Kevin McCarthy to join the meeting, he being of like mind on the issue with me, in which we made our case for why we believed mail-in voting not to be a bad thing for his campaign. But the president's mind was made up, and you understand, how many times to, go to the well on a particular topic.
Yeah, I understand. Tell me a little bit more about the argument that you and Mr. McCarthy made to the president in that meeting as to why it wasn't a bad thing that mail-in voting was available.
Largely two pillars to that argument, both of which I've previously mentioned. One, leaving a good deal to chance, pushing or urging your voters to vote only on election day leaves a lot to chance. That's A. And B, also previously mentioned, the fact that the Trump campaign, Republican National Committee, the Republican Party had an advantage of grassroots workers and volunteers on the ground that would allow, an advantage to enhance return rates of ballots that were mailed. Those were the two pillars of the argument.
I see. And what, if anything, do you recall Representative McCarthy saying during that meeting?
We were echoing the same argument. I mean, his words echoed mine, and vice versa on those two topics.
Mr. Stirewalt, you were at the decision desk at Fox News on election night, and you called Arizona early for President Biden, which was controversial. How did you make that call, and where did you think the race stood in the early hours of the next day?
Well, it was really controversial to our competitors who we beat so badly by making the correct call first. Our decision desk was the best in the business, and I was very proud to be a part of it. Because we had partnered with the Associated Press and the National Opinion Research Center at the University of Chicago, thanks to my colleague and friend Arnon Mishkin, had built a wonderful device for forecasting the outcomes of elections. So we had a different set of data than our competitors did. We had more research, and we had a better system, and we had a great team. So what you're waiting to see is, do the actual votes match up with the expectations in the poll? The real votes are testing the quality of your poll in targeted precincts and in targeted places. And let me tell you, our poll in Arizona was beautiful, and it was doing just what we wanted it to do, and it was cooking up just right. And at some
You're
point, and I
muted.
forget exactly
So
who,
beautiful.
but at some point it became clear
It was the most
that
beautiful poll we've ever.
I'm
Arizona was
sorry.
getting ready to
It was
make a call.
beautiful
So
poll.
we
It was beautiful
around,
poll I've ever
you know,
seen.
my boss,
I'm just
Bill
watching
Saban,
the
said, "We're
Dr.
not making
Spiegel
any call
cameraman guy
until
back there. He's
everybody
distracting
says
me
yes,"
with his
'cause that was
facial
always our
expressions.
So I
policy,
guess
unanimity.
I was
And you
muted
have
when
to
I
understand,
shouted into the void
in this
no, as they
room,
said, what if
Yeah.
any, huh?
you know, the best people from
But you guys might have
Pennsylvania,
you saw my pained
Democrats,
look on my
Republicans,
face.
a broad cross section of people who had worked together for a decade, who were really serious about this stuff. So we knew it would be a consequential call because it was one of 5
I think
states
that camera
really
guy
mattered,
just pressing
right?
buttons back
Wisconsin,
there.
Michigan, Pennsylvania.
Nothing seems to be in
Arizona were the
focus.
ones
He's
that
just.
we
It's
were
like all
watching.
Dr.
We knew it
Spiegel
would be significant
expressions
to
on
call
his
any one of
face.
those 5.
Oh, there he goes.
But we already knew Trump's chances were very small and getting smaller based on what we had seen.
Well, there's a Chi-Com
So
camera guy with
we
his
were
phone
able
back
to
there.
make the call early. We were able to beat the competition. We looked around the room, everybody says yay, and on we go. And by the time we found out how much everybody was freaking out and losing their minds over this call, we were already trying to call the next state. We had already moved on. We were to Georgia, we were to North Carolina, we were looking at these other states. So we thought we were pleased, but not surprised.
I see. You know, after the election, as of November 7th, in your judgment, what were the chances of President Trump winning the election?
After that point,
Yes.
none. I mean, I guess it's always possible that you could have, you know, a truckload of ballots be found somewhere, I suppose. But once you get into this space,
Theoretically,
you know, ahead of today, I thought about what are the largest margins that could ever be overturned by a recount, and the normal kind of stuff that we heard Mike Pence talking about, sounding like a normal Republican that night when he said, you know, we'll keep every challenge. Nothing like that. In a recount, you're talking about hundreds of votes. When we think about calling a race, one of the things that we would think about is it outside the margin of a recount? And when we think about that margin, we think about, in modern history, you're talking about 1,000 votes, 1,500 votes at the way, way outside. Normally, you're talking about hundreds of votes, maybe 300 votes that are going to change. So the idea that through any normal process in any of these states, remember, he had to do it thrice, right? He needed 3 of these states to change. And in order to do that, I mean, you're at an infant, you're better off to play the Powerball than to have that come in.
On November 7th, the other major news outlets called the race for President Biden. Now, Mr. Stepien told the committee that he thought the odds were, and this is a quote, very, very, very bleak, and held a meeting with the president that same day. Let's show clip 8, video clip 8.
I mean, with each day that wore on, I mean, the trajectory of the race, you know, on election night, Trump ahead in many states. And as that week wore on, as the 3rd became the 4th, became the 5th, and so on and so forth, and the vote by mail ballots were tabulated, you know, Trump's lead, you know, grew more narrow, and in
this is the best still picture they have of this guy.
You know, Trump in the vote totals. So as the week wore on, as we paid attention to those numbers multiple times a day, you know, internally, you know, I was feeling less confident for sure.
What was your view on the state of the election at that point?
You know, very, very, very bleak. You know, we told him, the group that went over there outlined, you know, my belief in chances for success at this point, and then we pegged it at you know 5, maybe 10% based on recounts that you know either were automatically initiated or could be initiated based on you know realistic legal challenges, not all the legal challenges that eventually were pursued. But, you know, it was, you know, my belief is that it was a very, very, I mean, 5 to 10%. It's not a very good optimistic outlook.
It's not
Now, as
statistically
President
zero.
Trump and others continued to claim that the election was stolen, there were lawyers who were a part of the campaign lawyers, who were responsible for investigating the fraud claims. That includes Alex Cannon, who could not validate the claims that were being made, including those being made by the president. Let's roll video 15. 13.
This is an email. It's two emails, actually. The first is from Alex Cannon to you and Faith McPherson. And then you forward that email on to Mark Meadows, Justin Clark, and Jason Miller, the subject being AZ Federal ID Voters. If you look at the original email there, it says, Bill, we completed the AZ analysis you requested. I assume that's about Arizona. And because of the substantial uncertainty surrounding the databases, this is a highly unreliable way to identify ineligible voters. Can you explain the task that you gave to Ms. Cannon for this Arizona analysis?
Sure. Previously, I described some of my frustration with some of the claims that people would throw at President Trump regarding, you need to look at this, this happened in this state or that happened in that state. And it would be, those would flow to us to look into. I talked about that before, I think.
Yep.
This is an example of that. I recall in Arizona, someone had thrown out, I believe this to be the claim, that there were thousands of illegal citizens, people not eligible to vote, having cast their ballots in Arizona. Someone had thrown out that claim to President Trump. And with, the margins being as close as they were, as I previously described, that could potentially matter. So this wild claim is thrown out, which, on its face didn't seem, realistic or possible to me. I asked Alex to look at the claim, and I haven't read this full email, but I recall the response to that. The reality of that was not illegal citizens voting in the election. I think it was like overseas voters voting in the election. So obviously, people who were eligible to vote.
When these findings were passed up the chain to President Trump, he became frustrated and he replaced the campaign's legal team. Let's play clip 14.
I think the president, it was during the second week where things like you displayed were occurring, where he was, growing increasingly unhappy with, his team, me less so because I was less involved at this point, but still me, growing increasingly unhappy with Justin Clark. And that kind of, paved the way for, Justin to be moved out and Mayor Giuliani to be moved in as the person in charge of, the legal side of the campaign, and for all intents and purposes, the campaign at that point.
Now, when Mr. Stepien became campaign manager, he was the second Trump campaign manager for the 2020 race, and there were only about 115 days until Election Day. So let's play the video.
I inherited a campaign that was, the day I was hired was, I believe, President Trump's low point in the 2020 daily average polling against President Biden. It was a campaign at a low point in the polls. It was structurally and fiscally deficient. There was a great deal wrong with the campaign in both of those areas. So most of my day spent fixing what, and I think I took over with 115 days left in the campaign. Most of my time spent fixing the things that could be fixed with 115 days left in the campaign.
Now, Mr. Stepien has been in the campaign field for a long time, and he worked for lots of different candidates and campaigns. He testified to this committee about his concerns given the claims that Mr. Giuliani and Ms. Powell and their team were making publicly. Let's play clip 15.
Okay, and was it important for you, Mr. Stepien, to sort of pull back just for your own professional reputation? You didn't want to be associated with some of what you were hearing from the Giuliani team and others that sort of stepped in the wake of your departure?
I didn't mind being categorized. There were two groups of, we called them kind of my team and Rudy's team. I didn't mind being characterized as being part of Team Normal, as reporters, kind of started to do around that point in time. I said, hours ago, early on that, I've been doing this for a long time, 25 years, and I've spanned, political ideologies from Trump to McCain to Bush to Christie, and, I can work under a lot of circumstances for a lot of varied, candidates and politicians, but situation where, and I think along the way I've built up a pretty good, I hope, a good reputation for being honest and professional. And I didn't think what was happening was necessarily honest or professional at that point in time. So that led to me stepping away.
So the president did get rid of Team Normal, and I'd like to play a clip showing that the president found the people he needed to perpetuate his claims of fraud.
They saw a big truck bringing in 100,000 ballots in garbage cans, in waste paper baskets, in cardboard boxes, and in shopping baskets. And every single one of them was for Biden because they were being notified by Smartmatic in Frankfurt that Biden was way behind and they better come up with a lot more ballots. And we can prove every single thing I just said. If you gave me the paper ballots,
what did I miss? What did I miss?
Around each one of these states.
None.
I'm absolutely convinced if you let me examine each one of those ballots, I'd pull out enough that were fraudulent that it would shake the hell out of the country.
It can set and run an algorithm that probably ran all over the country to take a certain percentage of votes from President Trump and flip them to President Biden, which we might never have uncovered had the votes for President Trump not been so overwhelming in so many of these states that it broke the algorithm.
I remember that one of the things Mark said at some point was, you can't show an actual vote was flipped, which I found at the time to be a remarkable assertion because you don't have to have the gun to see the body lying on the floor bleeding out with 5 bullet holes in it was killed by a gun.
What they were proposing, I thought was nuts. And then the theory was also completely nuts, right? I mean, it was a combination of Italians, Germans. I mean, different things have been floating around as to who was involved. Remember Hugo Chavez and the Venezuelan, she has an affidavit from somebody who says they wrote a software in, it's something with the Philippines, and just all over the radar.
Did you ever share, Mr. Kushner, your view of Mr. Giuliani? Did you ever share your perspective about him with the president?
I guess, yes.
Tell me what you said.
Basically, not the approach I would take if I was you.
Okay, and how did he react? How did President Trump react when you shared that view with him?
We said, I have confidence in Rudy.
I think I had conversations with probably all of our council who are signed up to assist on election day as they disengaged with the campaign. The general consensus was that the law firms were not comfortable making the arguments that Rudy Giuliani was making publicly. I seem to recall that I had a similar conversation with most all of them.
I made it clear I did not agree with the idea of saying the election was stolen and putting out this stuff, which I told the president was bullshit. And, I didn't want to be a part of it. And that's one of the reasons that went into me deciding to leave when I did.
Even Sidney Powell, defending herself in a defamation lawsuit brought by Dominion Voting Systems, argued that, quote, no reasonable person would conclude that her statements were truly statements of fact. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I thank the witness for joining us today. The first panel is now dismissed.
Is it over? No? Yes?
First panel.
Without objection, the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Last week, we presented the testimony of former Attorney General Bill Barr, who testified before this committee. Today, we present additional evidence, including his testimony that former President Trump started making claims of election fraud immediately after the election, and that Barr concluded the claims were untrue. Now, due to the length of Attorney General Barr's testimony, we're only going to include relevant portions at the hearing today. So let's
who determined
play,
which parts are relevant?
The video.
They did.
The department, in fact, when we received specific and credible allegations of fraud, made an effort to look into these to satisfy ourselves that they were without merit. And I was in the posture of trying to figure out, there was an avalanche of all these allegations of fraud that built up over a number of days. And it was like playing whack-a-mole because something would come out one day and then the next day it would be another issue. Also, I was influenced by the fact that all the early claims that I understood were completely bogus and silly and usually based on complete misinformation. And so I didn't consider the quality of claims right out of the box to give me any, feeling that there was really substance here.
For the first time since the election, the Attorney General spoke personally with the President on November 23rd, and this was at the White House. Let's play the video, please.
So on November 23rd, I hadn't spoken to the president since the election. And in fact, as I said, since the middle of October, roughly. And it was a little getting awkward because obviously he had lost the election and I hadn't said anything to him. And so Cipollone said, I think it's time you come over here. And so I came over to meet with the president in the Oval Office, and Meadows and Cipollone were there. And the president, and this is leading up to this conversation with Kushner, the president said there had been major fraud and that as soon as the facts were out, the results of the election would be reversed. And he went on this for quite a while, as he's prone to do. And then he got to something that I was expecting, which is to say that apparently the Department of Justice doesn't think that it has a role of looking into these fraud claims. So I said, that has to be the campaign that raises that with the state. The department doesn't take sides in elections, and the department is not an extension of your legal team. And our role is to investigate fraud, and we'll look at something if it's specific, credible, and could have affected the outcome of the election, and we're doing that. And it's just not, they're just not meritorious. They're not panning out. And as I walked out of the Oval Office, Jared was there with Dan Scavino, who ran the president's social media, and who I thought was a reasonable guy and believe is a reasonable guy. And I said, how long is he going to carry on with this stolen election stuff? Where's this going to go? And by that time, Meadows had caught up with me and leaving the office and caught up with me and said that he said, look, I think that he's becoming more realistic and knows that there's a limit to how far he can take this. And then Jared said, yeah, we're working on this. We're working on it.
Even after his attorney general told him his claims of election fraud were false, President Trump continued to promote these claims.
I felt that things continued to deteriorate between the 23rd and the weekend of the 29th. And then on November 29th, he appeared on Maria
I guess I'll
Bartiromo's
say
show,
this. I was waiting for an
Sunday
appropriate
Futures,
place
I
to
believe it
interject, but
was.
why not now?
And he said
I mean,
that the department
as to
was
the
missing in action.
election
glitches
lawsuits that were ongoing, and as to that, like, I agree with Barr. I mean, I looked at a good half of those cases, and they were all crap.
They're fraud.
So, like,
fraud.
what Barr's saying
election
is
was over, and then
legally
they did
correct.
dumps.
I mean, you don't have
They
to
call
like
them
him
dumps,
politically,
big,
but
massive
legally,
dumps.
he's right.
In
I looked at
Michigan and
the
Pennsylvania
lawsuits myself. There was just no
all
way,
over. How the
and half of them
FBI
were
and
just
Department of
complete
Justice,
garbage.
I don't know, maybe they're involved,
And
but how people
you know,
are allowed to
legally,
get
it's
away
just
from
you
this
could
stuff
not get to
with
where
this
you want to
stuff
be.
is
So
unbelievable.
Bill Barr's legal analysis is right on point.
Now, spurred by what he
And
saw,
I mean, that does not,
Barr
of
told
course,
the Associated
imply
Press on December
that I think
1st
that Trump
that
did
there was
anything
no
wrong,
evidence
because
of
I'm a
election
legal
fraud.
analyst,
And immediately
and I'm like,
after,
I can have
General
my,
Barr's
I can
statement
do
went
this
public.
both ways, right?
Mr. Trump
It's like, yeah,
berated
Barr's
and nearly
right. The
fired
election
Barr.
lawsuits were crap. There
But
was
Barr
no way to
persisted
overturn the
in
election. It
telling
wasn't
the
going to happen.
president
And
that
also,
there was
Trump
no
didn't do
evidence
anything
to
illegal
support
with
the
respect to
fraud.
January 6th. These, I can hold both these views at the same time.
Got
So it's like,
just
you know,
because
I also
the
felt
grounds
it
are
was time for
crap,
me to
he
say
still has the right to
something.
bring
So
crap arguments
I
to
had-
Yeah.
take it to court.
Right.
I
And
set
even
up
though,
a lunch with the AP reporter,
though
Mike
Barr's right,
Balsamo,
Trump didn't do
and
anything
I
wrong
told him at lunch
with his freedom of
made this
speech.
statement.
Right? He
That
can say it's,
maybe
he
we
can
have
say
not
things
seen fraud on
that
a
are
scale
wrong.
that could have affected a
He can
different
even say
outcome
things
in
he
the
knows to be
election.
lies if you assume that they're
I
lies.
had a
Lies are
later
protected by the First
meeting
Amendment.
scheduled at the White House at 3:00 with
So, I mean, defamation against a
Meadows.
person isn't, but generally speaking,
This
lies
was
are
previously
protected.
scheduled, so I
So-
knew this was going to come up, and I went over
I mean,
there and I told
there's some
my
legal
secretary
analysis
that I
I'll
thought I would
offer.
probably be fired and told not to go home. I mean, not to go back to my office. So I said, you might have to pack up for me. And
Well,
so when I got
Gertrude
over there, I
Stein,
met with the
Gertrude
chief of
Stein
staff.
thing
He
there.
said
There's
the
no
president
there
was
there.
angry.
Yeah.
He didn't really get into the issue.
And I
of
think
the
also,
fraud.
like, what a lot of these people have been saying in general is
And then I
correct,
went
because
up to
I do
Pat
notice the
Cipolloni's
subtle shift,
office,
and
and
I
we
don't
were
know the degree to
talking
which it's
with each
intentional
other.
or anyone else
And
noted,
the word came
but
down that
there
he
is
wanted
the
us
subtle
both to go
shift
to
from
the
the idea of
Oval,
there being no
and the
fraud
president was
to the
as mad
idea
as
of
I've
there
ever
being no
seen
fraud
him,
that
and he was
really
trying to
mattered in
control
the end. And I've
himself.
seen that in the
The
committee
president said, well,
hearings
this
as
is,
well.
killing
Like they
me.
keep saying
You
in
didn't
their
have to say
rhetoric,
this. You must have
and there's
said
been
this
change in
because you
rhetoric. I
hate
don't know if
Trump.
anyone else
You
has
hate
noticed,
Trump.
but they
And
keep
then
saying
he
like, oh,
raised
there's
the
no
big
basically,
vote dump,
there's
as he called it,
no
in Detroit.
fraud or no corruption that would be
And
sufficient to
he said
overturn the
people saw
election,
boxes coming
which
into
is
the
a
counting
different
station
statement
at
than
all
saying there
hours of
is
the
no
morning
fraud,
and
which
so
was a
forth. And I
ridiculous claim,
explained to
because
him
there's always fraud. It's
that
unavoidable.
at that
There's
point,
just
I
too
knew
many
the
votes
exact number
in
of
too many
precincts
places
in
to say there's
Detroit.
no
I think it
fraud.
was
It's just untenable.
630 something. I
To
said,
say there's no
"Mr.
fraud that would
President,
overturn the
there are
election is a
630
much more
precincts
tenable
in Detroit, and
position.
unlike elsewhere in the state,
So,
There's
like,
been
centralized
demonstrable cases
counting
of double voting
process,
and
so
dead
they're not
people
counting
voting.
yeah,
It
I
happens all
mean,
the time.
you're always going to have
to counting
something.
stations, and so the
It's
normal
unavoidable.
process would involve boxes coming in at all different hours. So there's nothing. And I
Not
said,
even
did
to say
anyone point
necessarily
out
it's
to
all
you,
intentional
all the people
too.
complaining about it,
People
point out to
voting in the
you who actually
wrong
did better
precinct,
in
people not
Detroit
filling
than
out the form
you
correctly.
did
Voters
last
do all
time.
kinds
I
of
mean, there's
crazy
no
stuff on their
indication of
ballots, man. Lord.
fraud in Detroit. And I told him that the stuff that his people were shoveling
But
out
I
to the
genuinely
public
think, and I
was
continue to think,
bullshit.
and it is
I
my
mean, that the
position,
claims of fraud were
both
bullshit.
personally and legally, that Yes,
ignorant
Joseph
about
Biden won the election.
And
you may not like the election rules.
reiterated
You may think
that
those
they
rules were
wasted a whole
improper in
month
some
on
places,
these
but
claims on
under the rules that
Dominion
existed,
voting machines, and they were
he won.
idiotic claims. And
that still doesn't mean Trump did anything
I
wrong in terms of
specifically
his
raised
rhetoric
the
with
Dominion
respect to
voting
January
machines,
6th.
which I found to be among the most
You don't need to necessarily
disturbing in the sense that I
believe
saw
extreme
zero
things
basis for
to
the allegations,
yeah.
but they were made in such a sensational
I can't
way
believe what I said just
that
qualifies
they
as a
obviously
nuanced
were
view. That's
influencing
very
a lot
sad
of
for me.
people, members of the public, that there was this systemic corruption in the system, and that their
If there was anything here, they would have the one witness that said, I heard Donald Trump say on this day, go here armed, do this, storm there, and take this thing back from me. There's not a single person that he said that to.
And on a fundamental level, they can't really show that anything that Trump said is, at least in isolation, as to the individual elements. They can't show that anything he said in individual is different than a lot of things that a lot of campaigns have said, both Republican and Democrat, including, I'm sure, some members of this panel have said. In terms of like, oh, the judicial process is the end. Really? Chairman with like, oh, I'm protesting these ballots in the House. Oh, but my protest is valid. Their protest isn't. Okay, why?
Of
Right? So it's like
149,772 votes came in unexpectedly. We were winning by a lot.
Yeah.
That batch was received in horror.
In horror. I don't know what even that means.
That's very suspect. Its name is Dominion. With the turn of a dial or the change of a chip, you can press a button for Trump and the vote goes to Biden. What kind of
objection, Foundation?
Barr again told the president that there was nothing to these claims on December 14th.
It was a huge tactical error to tell
Optimist
people not
says you talk too much. That's ironic since I've been silent most of this time. I'll go back to not talking anymore.
Monologue.
Trust me, you're not missing anything.
That there was now definitive evidence involving fraud through the Dominion machines.
And someone says lying systematically as a president is not right. He might not be prosecuted, but it doesn't make it right. I don't recall saying it was right. I don't recall making a moral argument. This is, again, a point of continuing frustration by me. It's like, I wish people would listen to my words with care, because I tend to choose them with care.
This is absolutely
not to say I never misspeak, but like, I never recall saying it was right.
The report means
or good.
That I'm going to have a second term.
My position was it was legal.
He gave me a copy of the report, and as he talked,
playing devil's advocate, find me a president who doesn't systematically.
And I also said, that a lot of the statements in isolation are very consistent with what other people have said in isolation.
Didn't have the credentials of the people involved, but I didn't
not being right and breaking the law are two totally different things.
Yeah, and the statements were
they don't go hand in hand.
Conclusory, like these machines were designed to.
Optimist says he's out of here. I talk too much.
But I didn't see any supporting
Okie doke.
Information.
Bye. Thanks for coming.
And
go watch TV, dude.
Somewhat demoralized.
If you want to watch this without commentary, there is the C-SPAN. I'm not sure I would necessarily recommend it, but it is an option.
Contact with,
even C-SPAN 1 doesn't want to have anything to do with this. This is C-SPAN 2.
If he really believes this stuff. On the other hand, when I went into this and would, tell him how crazy some of these allegations were, there was never an indication of interest.
Make that a little bigger.
In what the
I want to cut off any of the screen
my
glory there.
Then, and my opinion now is that the election was not stolen by fraud.
I wish I could get rid of this bar on the side, though.
I haven't seen anything.
Lita seems to be able to do it. I'm not quite sure
my
how.
Mind on that.
I could make it full screen, that'd do it, but then I wouldn't be able to see myself in my monitor. Maybe I need more than one monitor.
Well, maybe you can assess that 2,000 mules, and people are talking about that.
Well, I mean, just in a nutshell, I just think the GBI was unimpressed with it, and I was similarly.
That's the Georgia Bureau of Investigation.
Because I was holding my fire on that to see what the photographic evidence was, because I thought, well, hell, if they have a lot of photographs of the same person dumping a lot of ballots in different boxes.
I just have one big monitor.
claim.
But maybe I should get dual monitors and
So
get
I
smaller
wanted to see
monitors.
what the photographic
The big monitor also
evidence
interferes with the
was,
camera
but
placement. So
the
part of my camera issues
cell
are
phone
because
data
of the way
is
it's forced. Because I
singularly
got a 42-inch
unimpressive. I
monitor,
mean, it
and so the
basically
camera has
Jesus,
takes
dude.
a million
well, it's a 42-inch TV.
cell phones
It's just a 42-inch
and
4K.
figure out where they are physically in a
It's
I've
one
got
big
the,
monitor.
or
the
whatever.
34,
Probably turn that
Just
thing
the
on. It's like,
34-inch
you're gonna
curved
find
screen
many hundreds of them
gamer
have passed
monitor.
by and
And
spent
this is
time in the
huge.
vicinity of these boxes.
42-inch 4K, man. Works
And
great.
the premise that,
is it
if you
huge or is it
go by a
huge?
box, 5 boxes or whatever it was, that's a mule is just indefensible. It by definition, you're going to have hundreds of this. I mean, I saw one contractor said, we figured out that our truck alone would account for 6 cell phone signals. This was some kind of contractor.
Could well be.
And, our route would take us by these things on a regular basis. So but then when the movie came out, I think the photographic evidence in it was completely I mean, there was a little bit of it, but it was lacking.
You have a 32-inch 4K? I thought there's only one
establish
company that makes a
widespread.
32-inch 4K.
And
it's
I've got one.
It's comparatively expensive.
Mine was like $300. It's like
The
a
other thing
curved
is people don't
screen,
understand
32-inch,
is
like 16
it's
by
not clear
9.
Really? For a
even if you
32-inch
show
4K?
harvesting that changes the results
That's
of
what my
the
Samsung
election.
is.
The courts are not going
I'll have to look
throw
into
out
that.
votes.
Maybe I could
and
get two
figure
32-inch
out what
4Ks
votes were
and
harvested
solve
and throw
part of my
out.
problems.
Still, the burden on the challenging parties.
I will need
to
some
show
sort of
that
monitor
illegal
set up for
360
that.
monitors.
Votes were the result of undue influence or bribes, or there was really, the person was
Probably get you one of those
non-compos
recliner seats like
but
you ever see
absent that
Grandma's
evidence,
Boy?
I just didn't see
Where they
courts
got the
throwing out
TVs
votes
that go
anyway.
around blaring
I
music.
felt that
Oh, by the way, Legal Vices, have
before
you
the
picked an
election,
official
it was
emoji yet?
possible to talk sense to the president.
No.
And
Okay.
you sometimes had
Well, you
to,
got to pick an emoji. You
engage
got to
in,
make sure it's not one of the ones that anyone else is
big
using.
wrestling match.
I already
with
own the cowboy hat, and I'm now
that it
taking
was
claim to the
possible
orange
keep
heart.
things
So
on track.
those are
And I
mine. You got to get other
Shit.
ones.
Felt that after the election, he didn't seem to be listening, and I didn't
Well,
think
let me
it was,
search the emojis on the phone.
that I was inclined not to stay around if he wasn't listening to advice from me or his other cabinet secretaries.
So on December 14th, Barr quit. Now, the Attorney General wasn't the only
Is there a
person who
mustache
told the
emoji? You could be a
president
mustache
that his
emoji.
claims were false. Other officials and close advisors told him the same thing.
Rather than try to address a counterfactual or a hypothetical, let me just say there were instances where the president would say, people are telling me this, or I've heard this, or I saw on television, this impropriety in Atlanta or Pennsylvania or something. And we were in a position to say, how people have already looked at that. And
Just a
know
friendly
that we're
reminder
getting
to
bad
our
information.
iOS
That's-
users.
That's not correct.
If you don't see the join button, you can hit the link that Streamlabs just told you about to help join the channel and support financially. Your contributions are appreciated.
Or so after the election day, and at that meeting, various allegations of fraud were discussed.
Fraud or discussed.
Eric and Pat didn't, told the group, the president included, that none of those allegations had been substantiated to the point where they could be the basis for any litigation challenge to the election.
President Trump's own vice president and his top advisors also knew that there wasn't evidence to support the claims that the president was making.
Anyone else other than Mr. Meadows who asked you about the status outside of your legal group, Mr. Morgan and the others you mentioned, anyone else who asked you the status of what you were finding in your assessment of it?
Yes, sir.
Who's that?
I don't even know how the hell
Peter
you add an
Navarro.
emoji into StreamYards.
When did you talk to Mr. Navarro?
Mid-November.
Around the same time as Mr. Meadows?
Yes, sir.
And tell me about that conversation.
I recall him asking me questions about
Dominion and maybe some other categories of allegations of voter fraud. And I remember telling him that I didn't believe the Dominion allegations because I thought the hand recount in Georgia would resolve any issues with a technology problem and with Dominion or Dominion flipping votes. And I mentioned at that time that the CISA, Chris Krebs, had recently released a report saying that the election was secure. And I believe Mr. Navarro.
I'm thinking the whiskey glass and middle
agent of
finger.
the deep state working with Chris Krebs against the president. And I never took another phone call
Whiskey glass
from
could work.
Mr. Navarro.
Anyone else besides Mr. Meadows, Mr. Navarro, Mr. Hertzman that you had discussions with, inquiring about what you were finding in your review of the allegations that were
Also,
pouring
just
in?
want to thank everyone who's contributed financially with super chats today. This will be very, very suppressed
I believe I had
by
about a
YouTube,
15-second
and your financial
conversation with the
support
Vice
is
President about it as
appreciated.
well.
When was that?
Assuming you like this kind of thing.
During one of the visits to the White House, I don't know which one. I think it was the first one in November. I had met him briefly at the campaign, and he remembered me and saw me. And he asked what I was doing on the campaign, and I told him that, we were looking into some of the issues related to voter fraud. And he asked me, I don't remember his exact words, but he asked me if we were finding anything. And I said that I didn't believe we were finding it, or I was not personally finding anything sufficient to alter the results of the election. And he thanked me. That was our interaction.
At a later hearing, you'll hear live testimony from the former acting Deputy Attorney General of the Department of Justice, Rich Donahue. But now I'd like to play a portion of his testimony.
I tried to, again, put this in perspective and to try to put it in very clear terms to the president. And I said something to the effect of, sir, we've done dozens of investigations, hundreds of interviews. The major allegations are not supported by the evidence developed. We've looked at Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Nevada. We're doing our job. Much of the info you're getting is false. And then I went into, for instance, this thing from Michigan, this report about 68% error rate. Reality is it was only 0.0063% error rate, less than 1 in 15,000. So the president accepted that. He said, okay, fine, but what about the others? And again, this gets back to the point that there were so many of these allegations that when you gave him a very direct answer on one of them, he wouldn't fight us on it, but he would move to another allegation. So then I talked about a little bit about the Pennsylvania truck driver. This is another allegation that had come up.
Which at least superficially
And,
sounds reasonable.
this
I mean,
claim goes by a
if
truck
I've
driver
got
who
like 50 different
believes,
legal questions
perhaps
and my attorney
honestly,
explains one of
that
them
he
to
had
me, and I'm like,
transported
well,
an entire
okay,
tractor-trailer truck
let's go
full
through the
of ballots
I-49.
from New York to
I mean,
Pennsylvania. And this was again out there in the public and discussed. And I essentially said, look, we looked at that allegation. We looked at both ends, both the people who load the truck and the people who unload the truck. And that allegation was not supported by the evidence. Again, he said, okay. And then he said, no, I didn't mention that one. What about the others? And I said, okay, well, with regard to Georgia, we looked at the tape, we interviewed the witnesses. There is no suitcase. The president kept fixating on this suitcase that supposedly had fraudulent ballots, and that the suitcase was rolled out from under the table. And I said, no, sir, there is no suitcase. You can watch that video over and over. There is no suitcase. There is a wheeled bin where they carry the ballots.
I remember that. I know exactly the video they're talking about.
There's nothing suspicious about that at all. I told them that there was no multiple scanning of the ballots. One part of that allegation was that they were taking one ballot and scanning it through 3 or 4 or 5 times to rack up votes, presumably for Vice President Biden. I told him that the video did not support that. Then he went off on double voting. At the top of the next page, he said, dead people are voting. Indians are getting paid to vote. He meant people on Native American reservations. He said there's lots of fraud going on here. Told him flat out that much of the information he's getting is false and or just not supported by the evidence.
Yeah.
We look at the allegations, but they don't pan out.
Mr.
And I looked at a lot of
Barr
that stuff
and
too.
His advisors were not the only ones who
And some of
determined
that
the
initial stuff
president's
looked one way, and
allegations
then when
regarding
you looked
Dominion
into it,
voting machines
I
were
concur.
false. So, Mr. Chairman, I ask unanimous consent to include in the
Like
record
that one
of
with the
this hearing
ballots was a little bit
reports
sketchy on
issued
its
by the
initial
Department
read,
of
right?
Homeland
Because you got
Security's
these ballots on the boxes
Cybersecurity
being
and
put under and then
Infrastructure
recounted. The whole thing was a little
Security
sketchy
otherwise known as
because
CISA,
what was it? They were
that
called
addressed
off, or
and
they
rejected the
thought they were
claims of
they stopped counting for the
manipulation of
night
voting machines in the
in that
2020
district.
election.
So they'd stopped counting at
Without
like 10 o'clock or
objection,
something.
so
This will be
ordered.
slightly off, but
Thank you,
it's
Mr.
upcoming at
Chairman.
10
I also
o'clock.
ask unanimous consent
So they
to
had
include
counted
in the
some ballots,
record
but not all the
a
ballots.
report prepared
So
by
they
the
follow
Michigan
standard procedure,
Senate
right? They
Oversight
take the
Committee
ballots
that
that they've already
disproved
counted, put them
claims
into
of
place.
election
They
fraud
take
in
the ballots they
Michigan,
haven't counted, put
as
them
well
into
as a
place. They put
statement by
seals on them
59 of the country's
to
leading
reflect that they're sealed,
election
right? This is just
security
basic.
scientists,
Our
noting
detective
the
seeds, I'm sure, will
absence of
recognize some of these
any
concepts
credible evidence
with, you know,
that the
just the
2020
availability
election
of
had been
evidence and
altered
chain
through
of
technical
custody,
compromise,
right? So we put
and
seals on
5
things,
other
we open
reports
things,
from
we put them back in
organizations and
boxes, we put them back
individuals
with seals, you know, to
confirming
show chain of
there
custody.
was no
Very
widespread
similar
fraud in the
concepts, right?
2020
So they're
election
they're
or
stopping the
describing
count,
the
9
spread
o'clock, 10
of the
o'clock,
former
whatever. Right, they put
president's
the things
lies.
under the table
Without
where they're putting them
objection,
in.
so
They have
ordered.
the different spaces for
Thank you,
different
Mr.
things,
Chairman, and I yield
right?
back.
And then they get a call from, I forget whom it is, the Attorney General or
Pursuant to
whatever.
the
And it's
order
like, no, I want you to keep
of the
counting.
committee
I want you to
for the
finish
day,
counting.
The chair
You know, I want you
declares
to
the
finish
committee
tonight.
in recess.
Now
for a
they had
period
dismissed the
of
press and
approximately
dismissed
10 minutes.
the poll watchers, which was a little bit suspicious, right? They dismissed all the poll watchers because they thought, okay, we're done for the night. So they dismissed the media, they dismissed the poll watchers. Everyone goes home. They get on a call from the Attorney General. It's like, no, I want you to finish counting. All right, or whoever it was, you know, they get a call. I want you to finish counting. So they now come back in and they now undo everything to do. So now they're reopening the boxes, they're unbreaking the seals, they're following all the procedures they're supposed to be. But now the poll watchers aren't there, right? Which is a little bit odd because they're supposed to be there and we've sent them all home. And so that was odd. But then there's like this issue of like, okay, what ballots are these under the table? Are these counted ballots? Are these uncounted ballots? Blah, blah, blah. And right. And you go through actually everything and you actually go through it. And it's like, it's all completely legitimate. You know, it's all the ballots were counted that are legitimate. There was a slight violation in the process, which again is not atypical for there to be problems in process. You see it in elections all the time. It's like, does that comprise some sort of fundamental problem that we need some sort of redress about? Is a whole nother set of issues, because you see issues and so you look at them and like basically there's no they're there. The ballots were in fact properly counted. There was no double counting. There was no secret suitcase. It was all proper with some, you know, with some minor communication issues on the night of the election. But ultimately there's no there. It's like I watched the tape. I watched the affidavits where I read the affidavits. I read the complaint. I read these things in the thing. I'm like, yep, that all checks out to me. And so like there's ultimately no there. And this was kind of true for a lot of things. For example, there was this issue with it was Detroit. Detroit's county. Does anyone happen to know off the top of their head what county Detroit is in? No? Great. Anyways, carrying on. So there was an issue with Detroit because it looked like there were lots of these ballots that were improperly counted. And because they had initially reported them as like absentee, not absentee, counted that night. So there were two different columns, like for ones that were absentee, not absentee. And for some reason that passed my understanding, and I still don't understand why, Detroit counted them differently. They reported the numbers differently. So they were in two different spaces. So like all their absentee ballots weren't reported together. They were reported like 15 pages down, you know, and then you saw like basically like total votes cast 0, total votes count is cast zero, and then it's like votes for Biden, 500, or something like that.
Yeah.
And the problem was because of the nature of the reporting, the votes were there, they just weren't reported there, right? The total votes count, they were reported like 10 pages up because Detroit, for some reason, wanting to be different from all the other children, reported the numbers weird. But when you actually went and read the report, you're like, oh, okay, the numbers aren't here, the numbers are up here. And it all made sense once you looked at things. But it was a lot of stuff like that where things looked one way and then you actually looked at it and you're like, oh no, it's actually this other way. And so it all made sense. And this is like what I'm talking about and why I try to give good legal information on my channel. Because on the one hand, I can say, yeah, these election lawsuits didn't happen. This thing in Detroit didn't really happen. This thing in Georgia didn't really happen. This thing didn't happen. And then I can turn right around and also say at the same time, yeah, Trump didn't do anything illegal. I'm sorry, I've been talking for a little while. If my guests want to talk now, that'd be fine.
Go ahead. I mean, you're saying the truth. You're preaching the truth here.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
I mean, the bottom line, this entire hearing is about January 6th and whether or not he told people to go storm the Capitol, to go break in and storm. And there's no evidence of it. None.
Right.
And if you want to put some real blame on someone, you need to look into who was in charge of securing that perimeter. Who was in charge of the security around the Capitol and the event in general? Because you can't tell me that there was not signals intelligence and human intelligence leading up to this event, that they knew the size of how many people were going to be there. So if there was a request that was put in for more security and someone denied that request, that needs to be looked into, because that is the most.
These are pertinent questions.
In the January 6th
Washington,
Select Committee
D.C.
taking a short break, committee member Zoe Lofgren taking the lead today as they look at election fraud claims.
Certainly in the country, if you want to. I mean, you got multiple special operations teams that they're quick reaction forces to the White House or to the Capitol or these other places. They're 12 minutes away.
That's a much more interesting question to me. Like, what happened on the security issues on the day? Yeah. What role, if any? Oh my God, I just did it. I hate my own life.
Did it.
What role did Pelosi play? What role did the Capitol Police play? Were they told to stand down? Were forces offered that were turned down, denied? Yeah. Were security offered that was turned down, denied? Those would be interesting questions.
But
we're relitigating the campaign, which is dumb because it doesn't make any sense. And also it doesn't really matter to the issue we're ostensibly trying to solve, which is, okay, so Trump said a lot of crap. Fine. Is it illegal crap? No. Right. Did Trump do something illegal? No, not that I can see. Were forces offered that were refused? Well, if so, then why? And those would be interesting questions. But this is just, let's beat up on Trump for saying crap. I would like to introduce to the panel my friend, the lawyer from New York. It is none other than Nate, the lawyer. Hello.
Hey, welcome back, Nate.
Hey, what's going on? You guys can hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gotcha, man.
Oh my God! Thanks for the big introduction. I was watching you guys while I'm researching topics over here, and
yeah,
go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say, can we address one of the comments in chat that says Trump was the equal of Congress? He needed to act with more prudence. In case you don't know, the House Speaker, the Capitol Police, they answer to the House Speaker. So if you want to put all of it on Trump, that's completely your right to do. I'm just telling you from a security standpoint, for that location, that's not entirely how that works.
Well, you know what? I want to show you guys something because I was doing
one thought before you do that. Because there are people in chat saying, well, they just covered up their crimes. They just covered up their lies. And I just wanted to comment about this because you can't have it both ways. People in chat, like, you can't on the one hand say, okay, like the election was really stolen. The Democrats are just really, really good at covering up on their crimes. But, and then not also turn around and be like, oh, Trump really did participate in January the 6th. He's just really, really good at covering up his crimes, right? You can't have it both ways. You have to be intellectually honest. If you're going to say, okay, well, no, the election was really stolen, the Democrats are just really good at hiding it, then you're basically in the exact territory where the committee is. Oh, Trump really is guilty. He's just really good at hiding it. You know what I prefer? I prefer, how about we examine the actual evidence that's available? I only know what I can prove, is my standpoint. So I'm going to be consistent with I only know what I can prove. Yeah, I can't prove the Democrats, did something illegal with respect to the election and the balloting. I can't prove it. Yeah. And by the same token, I can't prove that Trump did anything illegal with respect to January 6th. So yeah, I'm going to go with I don't have evidence, I can't prove it. And I'm going to go with and how do you decide which way to go? Well, you do the presumption of innocence, right? You do the presumption, what is your default starting position? Your default starting position is, the election was correct. Your default position is, yes, Trump was doing things legally. Prove to me the opposite. Regardless of what evidence you need. It's like, I don't have it. So I get a little bit frustrated with the chat where they're like, oh, it's that the Democrats are just really, really good at hiding it. Yeah, then you're just in the Democrats' territory of Trump is really, really good at hiding it. And you've basically hoisted yourself by your own petard, my friends. Now, what would you like to offer now that I've talked way over you, Nate?
Listen, I'm not political in this particular sense, right? Mm-hmm. I think both sides are horrible. And people will say, both sides of them. I do think, but I think sometimes we forget about the facts and the evidence. Now, the reason why I am not really feeling this January 6th committee is because of the history. And I think people all right, let me just tell you what happened. So I was recently trying to do a breakdown of January 6th. And I typed in the search bar January 6th to try to get some headlines. And then I was like, oh, well, you know what? I want something closer to the time frame because you type in January 6th, you get everything, right? There's like so much stuff out there now. So I was like, let me narrow my search to January 6th, 2020, just around the date so I can get headlines from the day. That was a mistake because January 6th actually happened in 2021, not 2020. So when I typed in January 6th, give me everything up to January 6th, 2020, it gave me something else, something I totally didn't expect, something I believe no one knew. It gave me riots at the Capitol by Democrats. It gave me 200 arrests by Democrats when Trump was inaugurated. It gave me them burning cars. It gave it to me nationwide. Matter of fact, it was so crazy. I actually thought it was this January 6th. I was like, hold on, how the hell did this happen 4 years? Oh, okay. And I even found. Then I went to look at the news articles. All the news articles said, yes, 200 people arrested. It was a horror show. This is crazy. So just to give you guys a taste, I'm doing a video now, but just to give you a taste of what I found. Uncivil Law shared this video.
Okay. I will happily do that. Let's
now remember, people, this video is from 2016. Well, when Trump got elected in 2017. So this is.
Are you about to show that maybe some Democratic friends were not so willing to accept the election in 2016?
Well, and let's not forget, this didn't just happen in Washington D.C. This happened nationwide. So let's hit the play button so you guys can see this.
Burning cars and smashed windows. A small group of protesters dressed in black, their faces covered, armed with hammers and bricks. Facing off with thousands of officers on site, many in riot gear, confronting them with flashbang grenades and pepper spray.
All of a sudden, the police officers started to spray pepper spray, and they got our audio technician. They're coming. See us running because they're going to throw more flashbangs.
I remember this video.
The chaotic scene just blocks outside the secure area of the inauguration and parade route.
Now that's the key. Just before I continue to play the video, that's one of the key differences between January 6th and this event is because in January 6th they just cut everybody out. They're like nobody's even close to the buildings, and they had a perimeter. And the January 6th that we just had with Trump, they didn't do that. There was only 5 officers trying to stop 10,000 people. But here, when Trump was inaugurated, they had thousands of officers created a perimeter, so nobody could even get close to the building. So that's why all their crimes are happening in the streets, where all the other crimes were happening toward the buildings. But that's a distinction that people need to understand. Let me continue to play this out.
Personally, have anti-establishment slants, but I don't think that this is anything that I want to be a part of.
This checkpoint is closed! Before the swearing-in ceremony even began, protesters tried to block checkpoint entrances. It's closed! During President Trump's speech, several demonstrators were escorted out of the area.
Now, some people in the chat are saying protest versus insurrection. These people went there to stop Trump from getting inaugurated. These people went there because the Democrats said, go there and make your voices heard. These people went there to burn cars and destroy property because they were agitated and the Democrats were saying, let's stop, right? So let's just make it clear. It's the same exact thing, except 4 years earlier. Let me finish this out.
I think you're going to have a difficult time showing a difference in their underlying intent or goals. In terms of like the location is a little bit different, but what they're trying to do, carry on.
Several officers injured during the protest today, and more than 100 people arrested. Once the inaugural parade began, the newly sworn-in president facing thousands of peaceful protesters amongst his supporters. NBC's Stephanie Gosk was with him all day.
When Donald Trump took the oath of office, the people here sang, "We shall overcome."
Tonight, thousands of protesters.
So mind you, now, as you can see, at first they said there was small, now it's thousands of protesters. So the media is trying to spin it. But at the end of the day, you had thousands of people head to Washington, D.C., dressed in black with all this stuff in a coordinated attack to try to overthrow or to stop Trump from getting inaugurated.
Yep.
We have no commission. We have nothing. But fast forward. Now, I understand now this is where I always say, January 6th was not a failure in the protests. They knew they were coming, right? I literally have the spokesman for the Capitol Police said, we know they're coming. We know they said they want to take over buildings. They're being fanciful, right? This is not going to happen. We have things in place.
Are they speaking again? Are they back from break?
Can I ask real quick, Nate?
No, that's okay.
Just to kind of clear it up for everyone. Are you kind of saying that they weren't able to make it to the Capitol, so there wasn't an opportunity for them to do what happened on January 6th of 2021?
Correct.
I just want to make that clear.
Yes.
Okay.
Because what they did, they set up a perimeter and had thousands of officers there and said nobody can even get close to the buildings. Yeah. In January 6th, there was no perimeter, so the thousands of people went straight to the building.
Yeah, and I think that's
a key difference.
Yeah, that's important for people in chat to understand is that violence took place in the street and not the Capitol, because if you would have had the same perimeter set up, the people that this committee hearing's about, they wouldn't have been able to make it to the Capitol.
Well, how many cars were burned on January 6th? How many shops had their windows broken on January 6th?
Yeah.
But I just, and I hate this because people are going to say, Nate's another Trumper. He's an idiot Trumper. But I'm not showing you anything. Matter of fact, I even have a CNN article that said, this is so crazy. And it's like, what? No, just open your eyes, people, and just look. This is the political spin is one thing, but let's not pretend that only one side does this. When just 4 years ago, another side did it. The screen is mute, so I didn't.
Both sides are corrupt.
No, it is. I was just waiting for you guys. I thought we'd just put on screen while we're waiting.
But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to take over.
No, it's fine. No,
I just thought it was
I'm sure we've missed nothing of value. They're still introducing witnesses. It's fine. It's fine.
You just have to remember the mainstream media was saying with the fires and the tear gas in the background for our other event, this is just a small peaceful protest.
All right, he's talking now. All right, let's see what we got.
4th, I believe, of 2020. Attorney General Barr and I had a conversation about an unrelated case at issue. At the end of the conversation, Mr. Barr had asked me if I had seen a certain videotape that was being reported in the news where Mr. Giuliani, in a Senate subcommittee hearing that was held the day before, May 3rd, showed a videotape of a purportedly a security tape at the State Farm Arena in Atlanta, which is also in Fulton County in the city of Atlanta. City of, yes. At the time, Mr. Barr asked me that he had made a public statement that he had not seen any widespread election fraud that would question the outcome of the election. And because of the videotape and the serious allegation that Mr. Giuliani was making with respect to the suitcase full of ballots purported in the video, he asked me to find out what I could about it, because he had envisioned that in some days after our call that he was going to go to the White House for a meeting, and then that issue might come up. He asked me to make it a priority to get to the bottom of, to try to substantiate the allegation made by Mr. Giuliani.
Thank you. I understand the Georgia Secretary of State's office investigated those State Farm arena allegations and didn't find any evidence of fraud. What did you find when your office conducted its own investigation?
We found that the suitcase full of ballots, the alleged black suitcase that was being seen pulled from under the table, was actually an official lockbox where ballots were kept safe. We found out that there was a mistake in terms of a misunderstanding that they were done counting ballots or tallying ballots for the night. And the partisan watchers that was assigned by each of the respective parties were announced to send home. Well, once they realized the mistake, someone from the Secretary of State's office had indicated that, no, we're not done for the night. You need to go ahead and continue counting. So once they packed up the lockbox full of ballots, they brought back the official ballot box again and continue to tally the ballots from that.
Is any of this going to change anybody's opinion?
Unfortunately, during the Senate hearing, Mr. Giuliani only played a clip that showed them pulling out the official ballot box from under the table and referring to that as a smoking gun of fraud in Fulton County. But in actuality, in review of the entire video, it showed that that was actually an official ballot box that was kept underneath the tables. And then we saw them pack up because the announcement that they thought they were done for the night. And then once the announcement was made that you should continue counting, they brought the ballot box out and they continued to count. The FBI interviewed the individuals that are depicted in the videos that purportedly were double, triple counting of the ballots and determined that nothing irregular happened in the counting and the allegations made by Mr. Giuliani were false.
Thank you very much. I'd like to play again a testimony from Mr. Donahue, who appeared before the committee before today.
Mr. Donahue, we talked at some length about whether or not the White House or the president was informed about the Antrim report. On the results of the investigations, the interviews that have gone on Fulton County, how would those results have been communicated to the White House, to the president?
I don't know how they were initially communicated. I do know that they came up in subsequent conversations with the president, and Dag Rose and I essentially told him, we looked into that and it's just not true.
Okay, so he was informed.
I told the president myself that several times in several conversations, that these allegations about ballots being smuggled in a suitcase and run through the machine several times, it was not true. That we looked at the video, we interviewed the witnesses, it was not true.
Mr. Pack, after you left the U.S. Attorney's Office on January 4th, 2021, did the next U.S. Attorney there, I think Mr. Trump's personal pick, Bobby Christine, did he investigate any remaining claims of fraud? And if so, did he find any evidence that supported the president's claims of voter fraud?
It is my understanding that Mr. Christine continued any investigations that were pending at the time of my departure, but he was unable to find any evidence of fraud that affected the outcome of the election.
So after investigating the president's and Mr. Giuliani's claims about voter fraud in Georgia, is it your view today that there was no evidence of widespread fraud sufficient to undermine confidence in the outcome of the election in Georgia?
That is correct.
Thank you, Mr. Pack. And I want to thank you also for the service that you've given to our country. We appreciate that. Next, I'd like to turn to President Trump's false allegations about election integrity in Philadelphia. The Attorney General discussed these allegations at some length.
I bet they're happy today's started at 11.
Yeah,
where they can get to bed on time tonight.
Repeatedly suggested that there was some kind of outpouring of unexpected votes in inner city areas like Philadelphia. As recently as January 13th, when he walked off the NPR set, he was asked by the interviewer, what's your evidence of fraud? And he said, more people voted in Philadelphia than there were voters. And that was absolute rubbish. the turnout in Philadelphia was in line with the state's turnout. And in fact, it was not as impressive as many suburban counties. And there was nothing strange about the Philadelphia turnout. It wasn't like there was all these unexpected votes that came out in Philadelphia. So, I think once you actually look at the votes, and then there's an obvious explanation. For example, in Pennsylvania, Trump ran weaker than the Republican ticket generally. He ran weaker than two of the state candidates. He ran weaker than the congressional delegation running for federal Congress, and he ran weaker than the Republic, I think. I haven't looked at this recently, but he generally was a weak element on the Republican ticket. So that does not suggest that the election was stolen by fraud.
How about Pennsylvania and Bill McSwain? We were talking to the U.S. Attorney in Philadelphia about an alleged discrepancy between the number of absentee ballots issued and the number of ballots cast.
Right. So that was one of the big ones for a period of time. I think that was raised at Gettysburg by Giuliani or something like that, but it kept on being repeated, and I found it annoying because it didn't seem that it was right. So I called McSwain, and he got back to me. He said, no, the problem is that Mastriano threw out this number. And what he did was he mixed apples and oranges. He took the number of applications for the Republican primary and he compared it to the number of absentee votes cast in the general election. But once you actually go and look and compare apples to apples, there's no discrepancy at all. And, that's one of I think at some point I covered that with the president.
We have another witness here today who has detailed knowledge about the election process in Philadelphia. Mr. Schmidt, at the time of the 2020 presidential election, you were serving as the only Republican member of Philadelphia's 3-member city commission, which is responsible for overseeing elections throughout the city. Is that correct?
That's correct, Congressperson.
So President Trump made numerous claims regarding fraudulent voting practices in Philadelphia, including the claim that dead people were voting. In fact, Mr. Giuliani told Pennsylvania state legislators that 8,000 dead people voted in Pennsylvania. You investigated those claims of voter fraud. Can you tell us what you found?
Not only was there not evidence of 8,000 voters voting in Pennsylvania, there wasn't evidence of 8. We took seriously every case that was referred to us, no matter how fantastical, no matter how absurd, and took every one of those seriously, including these.
As it turns out, even Mr. Trump's campaign lawyers knew that the dead voter claims weren't valid.
I guess the crooks in Philadelphia are disappointed in this. They only submitted 8,021 ballots from dead people, mail-in ballots for dead people. Probably easier for dead people to submit mail-in ballots than it is to vote in person.
Rudy was at this stage of his life and the same ability to manage things at this level or not. And obviously, I think Bernie Kerik publicly said it. They never proved the allegations that they were making and they were trying to develop.
Mr. Schmidt, on November 11th, 2020, President Trump tweeted about you saying, and here's a quote, "A guy named Al Schmidt, a Philadelphia commissioner and so-called Republican or rhino, is being used big time by the fake news media to explain how honest things were with respect to the election in Philadelphia. He refuses to look at a mountain of corruption, dishonesty. We win." As a result of that tweet and the CNN interview you gave where you stated the dead voter claims in Pennsylvania were false, you and your staff were subjected to disturbing threats. Can you tell us about that?
The threats prior to that tweet, and on some level, it feels almost silly to talk about a tweet, but we can really see the impact that they have because prior to that, the threats were pretty general in nature. Corrupt election officials in Philadelphia are going to get what's coming to them. You're what the Second Amendment is for. You're walking into the lion's den, all sorts of things like that. After the president tweeted at me by name, calling me out the way that he did, the threats became much more specific, much more graphic, and included not just me by name, but included members of my family by name, their ages, our address, pictures of our home, just every bit of detail that you could imagine. That was what changed with that tweet.
Behind me are redacted threats that you received, that you provided to the committee. Now, we redacted portions of the text to protect your family. Mr. Schmidt, I think I speak for all of my colleagues when I say we are deeply sorry for what you and your loved ones have been through. And I also want to thank you for your service to your country and for standing up for the rule of law. I want to thank both Mr. Pack and Mr. Schmidt for their service, their testimony, and for standing up for the rule of law. Now I'd like to turn to another subject. The courts in our country provide a legitimate venue for campaigns to challenge what they view as irregular election practices. Now, courts have the final say on how the law applies to those challenges. We have a renowned legal expert here to address the Trump campaign's activities in court. Mr. Ginsburg, you've spent your entire career representing Republicans in election-related litigation. You served as the National Counsel on Republican presidential campaigns in 2000, in 2004, and in 2012. You played a key role in the 2000 Florida recount that led to the Supreme Court's decision in Bush v. Gore. You served as the co-chair of the Presidential Commission on Election Administration. I think it's fair to say you're the most prominent Republican lawyer who's litigated in the election field. Now, you've analyzed the Trump campaign's litigation pretty carefully. What's the normal process for post-election litigation? How is the Trump campaign's different from the kinds of post-election litigation you've been involved in and know about?
In the normal course of things, any campaign on the night of the election and the days after will do a couple of different things. One is that they'll analyze precinct results to look for abnormalities in the results, and they'll send people to those precincts to ask more questions. Secondly, all campaigns will have poll watchers and poll workers and observers in the polling place. And so campaigns will talk to those people if they saw any irregularities that could cause problems in the election. Now, the Trump campaign talked pre-election about having 50,000 poll workers. So presumably, they did have eyes on the ground in all these places. And so in the normal course of things, a campaign will analyze the reports that come in. Trump campaign had a couple of basic problems, however. Number one, the 2020 election was not close. In 2000, that was 537 and close. In this election, the most narrow margin was 10,000 and something in Arizona, and you just don't make up those sorts of numbers in recounts. And when the claims of fraud and irregularities were made, you've heard very compelling testimony from Mr. Stepien, from Matt Morgan, from Alex Cannon about those claims and how they didn't believe them. And so that put the Trump campaign on sort of a process of bringing cases without the actual evidence that you have to have in which the process is designed to bring out.
So are you aware of any instance in which a court found the Trump campaign's fraud claims to be credible?
No, there was never that instance. In all the cases that were brought, and I've looked at the more than 60 that include more than 180 counts. And no, the simple fact is that the Trump campaign did not make its case.
The Select Committee has identified 62 post-election lawsuits filed by the Trump campaign and his allies between November 4th, 2020 and January 6th, 2021. Those cases resulted in 61 losses and only a single victory, which actually didn't affect the outcome for either candidate. Despite those 61 losses, President Trump and his allies claim that the courts refused to hear them out, and as a result, they never had their day in court. Mr. Ginsburg, what do you say about the claims that Mr. Trump wasn't given an opportunity to provide the evidence they had of voter fraud? Did they in fact, did they have their day in court?
They did have their day in court. About half of those cases that you mentioned were dismissed at the procedural stage for a lack of standing. The proper people didn't bring the case, or there wasn't sufficient evidence and it got dismissed on a motion to dismiss. But in the other, there was discussion of the merits that was contained in the complaints. And in no instance did a court find that the charges of fraud were real. And it's also worth noting that even if the Trump campaign complained that it did not have its day in court, there had been post-election reviews in each of the 6 battleground states that could have made a difference. And those ranged from the somewhat farcical Cyber Ninjas case in Arizona to the Michigan Senate report that was mentioned earlier, the hand recount in Georgia that Mr. Pack addressed. And in each one of those instances, there was no credible evidence of fraud produced by the Trump campaign or his supporters.
Thank you. You know, as Mr. Ginsburg has explained, there are no cases where the Trump campaign was able to convince a court that there was widespread fraud or irregularities in the 2020 election. Over and over, judges appointed by Democrats and Republicans.
Blood pressure's going up. That's his right to bring these lawsuits if he wants to.
Narrative. They called
I seem to recall them saying that earlier in this hearing.
Evidence for its claims.
Several times, as a matter of fact.
Even in cases where they could have simply thrown out the lawsuit without writing a word.
See, the lawsuits don't bother me. It's like,
You can see
file
behind
a
a few
stupid lawsuit if you want.
The decisions in these 62 cases
Filing the lawsuits is somehow improper.
was criticized by
No, that's what you want them to do.
political
That's what you
spectrum.
want them to do.
In Pennsylvania, a Trump-appointed judge concluded, quote, charges require specific allegations and proof. We have neither here. Another Trump-appointed judge warned that if cases like these succeeded, quote, any disappointed loser in a presidential election able to hire a team of clever lawyers could flag claimed deviations from election results and cast doubt on election results. The list goes on and on. Allegations are called, quote, an amalgamation of theories, conjecture, and speculation. In another, strained legal arguments without merit, unsupported by evidence, derived from wholly unreliable sources, a fundamental and obvious misreading of the Constitution. The rejection of President Trump's litigation efforts was overwhelming. 22 federal judges appointed by Republican presidents, including 10 appointed by President Trump himself, and at least 24 elected or appointed Republican state judges dismissed the president's claims. At least 11 lawyers have been referred for disciplinary proceedings due to bad faith and baseless efforts to undermine the outcome
Yep,
of the
you can't do
2020
that in
presidential
court.
election. Rudy Giuliani had his license to practice law suspended in New York. And just this week, a newly filed complaint will potentially make his suspension from practicing law in DC permanent. And as we've just heard from perhaps the most preeminent Republican election lawyer in recent history, the Trump campaign's unprecedented effort to overturn its election loss in court was a deeply damaging abuse of the judicial process, as stated by U.S. District Court Judge David Carter.
Lee, are you going to ask
This
a question
was,
or
quote,
just
a coup
No.
in search of a legal theory?
This is, you know how Congress does
Thank you,
these
Mr.
things.
Chairman.
So
I
annoying.
yield back.
It is very annoying.
I want to thank our witnesses for joining us today. The members of the Select Committee may have additional questions for today's witnesses, and we ask that you
Shit, I'd hope
respond
so. They didn't really even ask
expeditiously
him any
in writing
questions.
to those questions. Without objection, members
hope
will
he
be
had
permitted 10
Jesus.
business days to submit statements for the record,
Thank you for being.
including opening remarks and additional questions for the witnesses. The second panel of witnesses is now dismissed.
Oh, I was really hoping that, say we're done for the day. Aw.
All right, so let me just get this straight. We should all just be understand this. This is relitigating Trump lost, right? Because I'm under the impression Trump lost. He lost badly. So what, right? That I don't care about. This is supposed to be about January 6th. So just the fact that
Without
he's saying
objection,
he lost.
the chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lofgren, for a closing statement.
Oh, God, it's
We got a
closing.
closing statement.
It's almost
Thank
over.
you, Mr. Chairman. Now that we understand the litigation efforts by President Trump and his allies, I'd like
We
to
already
present
understood it, though.
additional actions taken by the Trump campaign during this time. President Trump continued to push the stolen election narrative, even though he and his allies knew that their litigation efforts, making the same claim, had failed. It's worth pointing out that litigation generally does not continue past the safe harbor date of December 14th. But the fact that this litigation went on, well, that decision makes more sense when you consider the Trump campaign's fundraising tactics. Because if the litigation had stopped on December 14th, there would have been no fight to defend the election and no clear path to continue to raise millions of dollars. Mr. Chairman, at this time, I'd ask for unanimous consent to include in the record a video presentation describing how President Trump used the lies he told to raise millions of dollars from the American people.
Have
These
we ever
fundraising
had
schemes were also part of the effort
a Democrat
to disseminate the false claims of election
fight
fraud.
to the Supreme Court
Without objection.
to the last day of all? His name was what? What was his name? Gore, something like that?
No, I can't remember what his name. No, I can't remember.
Did he go to like the last Supreme Court and said,
Trump campaign sent millions
Yeah,
of
we already had hanging Chad sneaking around the corner earlier today,
This is just so hypocritical. It's like, what? What is she talking about?
was undermining the election.
Politics, man.
Implored supporters to, quote, step up to protect the integrity of the election and encourage them to,
I just
quote,
want to say
fight back.
so after
As
every
the Select
question and
Committee has
statement.
demonstrated,
Oh,
the Trump
in fact,
campaign knew these claims of voter
didn't
fraud
Gore
were false.
fundraise to help him go to the Supreme Court? Hey, let's.
If I tell someone to fight back like in an argument, I'm not telling them to go in and punch someone in the nose.
And then freak the F out when the Supreme Court said we're done.
Is it fair to say that the election defense fund was another, I think we called it a marketing tactic? Yes. And tell us about these funds as marketing tactics.
Just a topic matter where money could potentially go to be, how money could potentially be used.
The claims that the election was stolen were so successful. President Trump and his allies raised $250 million,
AI certainly has come a
nearly
long way.
$100 million in the first week after the election. On
They
November
gotta make
9th,
better videos.
2020,
I
President
could
Trump
produce something
created
better
a
than this.
separate entity called the Save America PAC.
I'll start making some
Most
claims
of
for
the money
$250
raised
million.
went to
I'm
this
just
newly
saying, man.
created PAC, not to election
I'm
related.
gonna
won the
start doing
election.
all of my live streams.
I won the
Discovered
election.
That the Save
It's all
America
fraud.
made millions of dollars
Can I
of
just
contributions
point out they've
to
spent over
pro-Trump
$2 million
organizations,
on this that
including
we've
$1
seen so
million
far. That's how
to
much
Trump's
this
chief of
investigation's
staff, Mark
cost.
Meadows' charitable foundation.
2 million of our
$1 million.
dollars.
Don't talk about that. It's just too depressing.
Tell me, Kurt, what do you think? I'm going to do all of my things from looking off to the side because it's dramatic and it's effective. God, this is
There's still
poor
more.
production.
I have to find the right page to bring back some more audio. Hold on. I'm sorry. The thing apparently expired. The site itself lost patience.
Yeah.
The evidence developed by the Select Committee
Damn, you got it
highlights how
back.
the Trump campaign
Sorry.
aggressively pushed false election claims to fundraise, telling supporters it would be used to fight voter fraud that did not exist. The emails continued through January 6th, even as President Trump spoke on the ellipse. 30 minutes after the last fundraising email was sent,
Attica,
the Capitol was
Attica.
breached.
Now, is this the video from 2016 you were showing us earlier, Nate?
I think this might be it.
I don't know. It looks. I don't know. It's hard to. I don't know.
No, there's much fewer people than there were in the 2016
okay.
Every
one.
American is entitled
You
and
guys-
encouraged to participate in our electoral process.
Oh, matter of fact, I even got
Political
some. I got
fundraising
some
is part
videos
of
from
that.
inside
Small
when people were
dollar
protesting
donors
inside the
use
Capitol.
disposable
2016,
income
I
to
bet you
support
do.
candidates
In 2016, it's
choosing.
crazy.
Didn't they go in and
This is perfect.
protested inside the Capitol
Those
during
donors
Kavanaugh's
deserve the truth
hearing?
They,
about what those
yeah,
funds
and
were used
and they
for.
also
Yeah.
they were also
Security.
protesting.
Investigation.
They were also
Technically-
protesting in state houses too. I even got video of the
That
protesting in
wasn't. That
state
wasn't a
houses.
protest.
Misled
Technically, that was a
donors as to
harangue.
where their funds would
A
go
fun legal word.
and what
That
they
was a
would be used
harangue.
for.
I hate both
So not
sides of
only
these
was there the
assholes.
big lie,
Pretty
it was
much.
the
Yeah.
big ripoff. Donors deserve to know where their funds are really going.
Oh,
They
he
deserve
said,
better
where are
than
my
what
funds
President
going for this
Trump and his team
effing
did.
hearing?
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Here's a good question. Have I missed anything
Without
worth knowing?
objection,
Okay,
the chair
guys,
recognizes
we
No.
have to. No,
Chairwoman
you guys have to
Brown.
mention at least one thing we
Cheney
learned
for a closing
today that's
statement.
worth knowing.
Thank you very
Go.
much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I would like to thank all of our witnesses today. And I'd also like to, in particular, wish Mr. Stepien
You can do it. I
and
believe
his
in you.
family all the best on the arrival
Well,
of
I
a new
will say
baby.
this though.
Today's
Two
hearing,
things can be
Mr.
true.
Chairman, was very narrowly
Let me wait till
focused.
she finishes, because two
And in
things
the
can be
coming
true, and they're trying to
days,
act like
you
it's
will
not.
see the committee move on to President Trump's broader planning for January 6th, including his
Broader
plan
planning?
to corrupt
Broader
the
than we already
Department of
have?
Justice.
Now, is he the biggest effing idiot that's ever existed in the history of mankind, or is he this scheming madman who's plotting to overthrow the
state
government through
legislatures,
these
state officials,
maybe both.
and others
massive
overturn the
plans?
election. Let
Maybe
me
both.
leave you today with one clip to preview what
Another
you will
clip.
see in
Another
one of our
clip.
hearings
Preview
to
clip.
come.
Preview
This
clip.
is the testimony of White
This is
House
a teaser.
lawyer Eric
A
Hirschman.
teaser trailer.
We get a teaser trailer.
Okay.
The day after January 6th.
You're supposed to do this after
It's
the
like the
credits
end of a
roll.
Marvel movie.
You're supposed to
Where
do
they
this
give us
after the
something
credits
else.
roll with the teaser trailer.
Call me next time. Let me help
Are
you
you
guys
out
out.
of your effing mind? Right?
What the hell is that behind him?
But I only want
It's
to
a
hear
giant
two words
hamster.
coming out of your mouth.
It's a
from
Japanese
now on.
anime hamster.
Do do do
Orderly
do 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 do.
That's a
It's
good
the
teaser.
pedo bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Woo!
At the
Teaser, baby.
conclusion of
Are you
last
gonna let any
week's
other
hearing,
Republicans speak at any point?
we
Just out of
showed you a
curiosity?
video of
We haven't had one
rioters
speak
Are there
yet.
any other Republicans on this
why they
committee?
had come to
Two. There's only
Washington
two.
on January
There's none
6th.
so far.
It was because Donald Trump told them to be here. Today, we heard about some of the lies Donald Trump embraced and amplified when it became clear he didn't have the numbers of votes to win the election. We heard about how officials at different levels of government explored claims of fraud and found no evidence. Yet the former president continued to repeat those false claims over and over again. Today, we'll end things where we did on
But
Thursday.
you guys, you fully
back on
believe that Trump
January
was a
6th.
legitimate president, right?
Hearing words of
Right?
individuals who
Personally,
wanted
you
to
believe
stop
that Trump was legitimate, right?
transfer
Me?
of power.
No, I'm talking to the chairman.
We
I'm
know
talking.
he
I'm
was
talking to the. I'm
bad
talking to the
because
voice
of
through the
Donald
camera.
Trump.
I'm like, hell yeah,
Now
he was
we hear
legitimate.
some of
He
the
was.
things they believe.
He believes he's fully legitimate,
Without
right?
objection,
He believes the election's
I
fully
enter
legitimate.
into the
and,
record.
You know, all
Video
that, right?
presentation.
Right?
I know exactly what's going on right now. Fake election. They think they're gonna fucking cheat us out of our vote.
Kick-Ass 3, the insurrection.
It ain't fucking happening today, buddy. You voted?
Yes, sir.
How'd it go?
Voted early. It went well, except for the can't really trust the software. Dominion software all over.
We voted, and right in the top right-hand corner of the Dominion voting machine that we use, there was a Wi-Fi symbol with 5 bars. So that most people connect to the internet, without a doubt.
What?
So they stole that from us twice. We're not doing it anymore. We're not taking it anymore. So we're standing up. We're here, and whatever happens, we're not laying down again.
You know they interviewed like 8 million people and got the 4 stupidest people in
Yeah,
the
just,
group.
yeah.
No! Trust the system. 200,000 people that weren't even registered voted.
No.
That guy brought his Powerball ticket,
No.
tucked into his pocket. He's
No.
like, I ain't missing one, baby.
Yes, I can.
I don't want to say that what we're doing is right,
It's not.
But if the election's being stolen, what is it going to take?
Really nice hair for an insurrectionist.
I mean, fair. Good product.
You know what? I
The chair
need to.
requests those in the hearing room remain seated until the Capitol Police have escorted members from the room. Without objection, the committee stands adjourned.
Hopefully there's enough of them there.
All 5 of them.
Yeah. Bike racks.
What is the best bike rack for the riots?
I like all racks.
Now, you know what? It's. I understand why people on both sides sometimes hate me, and that's because
so many reasons. Where do we start?
Yeah, it is. It's just totally Dominion voting. Let's talk about Dominion voting. If I were to tell you that before the election, PBS, ABC, CBS did exposés on how Dominion voting machines were untrustworthy and that we had to be careful, would you believe me? Would you believe me?
I would not believe you. Surely there were no exposés from those sources saying Dominion voting machines might in some way be untrustworthy. I don't know where you're coming up with these statements. Democrats saying the voting machines might not be trustworthy. You're lying through your teeth.
No, listen. Let's just do this. You know what? Since I'm the receipt guy, I like to bring receipts. What about, you know what? I'm even going to be more specific. I'm going to say how they were concerned about the voting machines in Georgia.
No.
How is that? Can I be that specific?
Fake news. Democrats never questioned the voting machines. They never said that the Dominion voting machines might be questionable, particularly in Georgia. Fake news. Never happened.
Listen, let me show you guys exactly what they said. That since this is since you know it's only this is just all made up. There's no way. Click this. Let's look at this link.
All right. Well, we'll see this so-called link from so-called Nate.
Yes, look at this. I shared this video.
Your real name, the lawyer.
So this is let me do this. So this is PBS. Will Georgia's new voting machines solve election problems or make them worse? PBS, and this is October 26, 2020, before Election Day. And in this,
Can we just point out Harry's face right here that you stopped on?
Protecting the voting process.
Before we started.
I wish I had hair because I would look just like that dude.
Now, in this video, they complain. It's this 7-minute video. They go into how Dominion voting systems have issues. And they found issues, and they've had to help to have them change it and do all this other stuff. And that the voting machines had issues. That's why it's this securing the vote, because obviously they thought Trump would win Georgia, so they threw some shade into the Georgia election system. This is PBS.
They were doubting the voting machines, the process, the sanctity of the elections. Bullocks. Nothing like that happened.
Listen to this.
That
curb your tongue.
There's nothing that stops an attacker from just
codes where the votes are encoded.
This is it.
For the plaintiffs in the lawsuit against the state have uncovered several troubling issues. Alex Halderman looked closely at the QR codes where the votes are encoded for the scanner.
By analyzing the structure of the QR codes, I've been able to learn that there's nothing that stops an attacker from just duplicating one. And the duplicate would count the same as the original barcode.
And in late September, another concern came to light. During testing, election workers found half the names of the 21 candidates for Senate intermittently disappeared from screens during the review phase.
You know what? I don't want to get you copywritten strike. I don't want to get us. You know, this is they're going to say this is misinformation. They're going to say misinformation. Yeah. Misinformation, right? The names are disappearing. QR codes don't work. Duplicate. They're going to say
can't find it. Can't find any Democrats talking. Oh wait, that's right. No, you can definitely find that too.
This is the type of hypocrisy that is crazy, right? It's crazy. That's PBS. I got CBS. I got ABC. All saying there's problems with the voting machines. After the election, there's no problems with the voting machines, right? It's so hypocritical because people didn't. It's like I understand they're trying to say people just made this up, but it was them. It was them. They made it up. And then when people said, yeah, this obviously it seems like there's problems, now they're saying, oh, well, there was no reasonable basis to think there were problems. Yeah, when you tell people a month before there's problems with the machines, then after the election, they're going to say, yeah, there's problems with the machines. That's what you told us.
You know,
right?
now that you mention it, I am remembering some news reports in let's say the month before the election about security of elections and security of the ballot and security of election machines and issues and sanctity of. I'm remembering some articles in the ramp up in the month before. I seem to remember those might be coming from more left-leaning sources though in the month before the election. And now it's like nope, Trump's bad for very suggesting. It's like you could just literally just repeat what they said, and yeah.
You want me to show you? Listen, just to show you guys just to show you how concerned they were with the voting machines in Georgia. This wasn't just one video. PBS did a series. They did
I remember that. Yeah,
series on it. Let me show you the series.
Yeah, I remember.
Show us more of this fake news from PBS.
What year did they do this?
This is a month before the election. This is a couple of months before the election, leading up to the election. So these are the 4 videos. Gotcha. Georgia's new voting machines solved the election. Is your vote safe? What election officials think about paper ballots? And then in Georgia primary election, chaos highlights voting system.
Now at this point, I don't even know where we are in terms of YouTube, because YouTube really does not like any suggestion that the elections might have been unsecure. But these suggestions are coming from the Democrats in the run-up to the election. So I guess for the sake of YouTube, I will continue to reiterate that there is no evidence that the election was stolen. And here are some very, very bad Democrats who are wrong and even beginning to suggest the alternative. Because the election is totally safe. Play that beautiful beam footage, Nate.
Which footage? Are you want to hear more footage of?
Yes, please.
All right, so let's do this one. Let's do in Georgia primary elections chaos. Oh no, you want to do more of this? Hold on, let me just play this. Here we go.
Dominion sent out a last-minute software patch.
I'm worried that the Georgia system is the technical equivalent to the 737 MAX. They've just made a last-minute software change that might well have unintended consequences.
Let me stop this. Before I don't want your channel to get terminated, Kurt. They're saying the wrong
for election.
Things, man.
This is election disinformation from PBS, guys.
And look at the date. Just because people are gonna say, "What about the date?" Look at that date. We voted the first Tuesday in November,
October
2020.
26th.
October 26th.
Yeah, okay.
So this is 2 weeks before the election. So
yeah.
There's a lot of spin going on out here, guys. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Trump lost. I think he lost badly. I think Biden is truly the winner. I think what happened to January 6th is horrible. But don't think that they just pulled this out of their behind. They were talking about this leading up to that day, and especially trying to throw shade in places where they thought Trump was going to win. Obviously, Georgia. Trump lost Georgia, and then he flipped the script. He said, okay, since you guys were saying this, let me flip the script. Yeah, there's a problem with the machines. And now they're saying that he had no.
I learned it by watching you, basically.
Here it is.
Cause even more severe problems on election day.
You never want to rush something which is mission critical, and this is mission critical.
He has a foreign accent. I don't trust him.
Testing. That's really one of the ways bad actors are finding the vulnerabilities to exploit, is looking for
never trust a Norwegian.
Finding out if they can be weaponized.
That's actually pretty good advice.
Despite all the concerns, federal judge Amy Totenberg decided to let the election proceed with the ballot marking device system. The Secretary of State says post-election audits will bring any QR code discrepancies to light.
We're in the process of really, continue to expand the capabilities that we have so we can audit more.
So here's the Secretary of State, the one that, so here he is, has to defend that the voting systems are good because people got all these questions. It's all messed up. That's what I'm saying, people. Here, especially on my channel and especially on Civil's channel, we try to get through the nonsense, and obviously this exposes the nonsense for what it is, right? They've done and I think it's beautifully what they've done. They've done a double switch, right? The double switch is claim that there's going to be a problem, then you win, then Now, when the other side says, yeah, you were right about the problem, pretend that they don't know what they're talking about. And that's exactly what we got here. We got a classic double switch.
Jedi mind tricking us.
And how many people are never going to see what we just showed? And how many people
Lots.
will never see this, right?
Lots.
Will never know that this was the Democrats were the ones saying this right before the election.
And I don't care which side is saying this, I would be saying the exact same thing here. That's the beauty I have for being in Korea for 34 years now. I didn't vote in the last 2 elections. The first elections I've never voted in because I thought if I have a choice of Trump and Hillary as the best 2 candidates to represent my country, it gets whatever it happens, it deserves. And then it's even worse when Biden and Trump are my only 2 choices as the best possible candidates for leading the greatest nation on earth. America deserves whatever happens to it if those are the 2 people you're putting up. So I don't care which side is making these arguments that just happen to be being made by the left now. I would say exactly the same thing if the tables were reversed. It's nonsense.
Yeah.
Show me where somebody did something illegal. It's not there. It's wasting my taxpayers' money that I have to pay, even though I haven't lived there for 34 damn years. It's insane that, as you said, people. This isn't going to change anybody's idea.
No,
everybody's made up their mind 8 years ago. As soon as he announced his candidacy, we all knew where the people were going to come.
When we
out.
descended from the escalator, that was the moment everyone decided, right?
How many people are on this panel? 9? Was there 9 on this committee?
Something like that.
I think so, yeah, something like that.
Okay, that's 9 people that could be trying to come up with ideas on, mass amounts of inflation. I don't care if this was Republicans doing this. It's a giant waste of time. It's a giant waste of money. You know?
It is.
If there was proof, show it. But we haven't seen any, and there's not any. There's not one shred of evidence that Trump said, hey, go do this. Go break into the Capitol. Because if there was, it would be on every news station right now, playing over and over and over and over again, and that would have been the first piece of evidence that they put in here. So it's just it's a waste of money, man.
What they're trying to do is that every politician who loses riles up their supporters. Al Gore did it, right? People were marching in the street. Al Gore, running the money. Let's go to the Supreme Court. He went all the way to the Supreme Court, right? In December, they're like, okay, finally it's over. The other guy won. Okay. The same thing with Hillary. Hillary's going after Trump won. Hillary said Russia was the one that did it, right? How was that after a shade into election, right? He's Russia's president. They the ones
with
who
the
know.
Steele dossier.
Yeah. And she straight up said that she was like, he didn't win. Russia, it was Russia. The Russians did it. Russians did it. So it's like I do understand the fact that it happened at the Capitol building in Congress, yes. But I think that happens because of the security failures, and I think you can't blame Trump for saying everything that every other politician said, except I think he was just more convincing in saying it.
Well, as soon as one presidential candidate says or does something, or as soon as it sets a precedent for what happened. Like Al Gore started this. Every president since then has been contested, and the other party said they didn't win fairly and legitimately. The Republicans impeached Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
And then every president after that, someone has called for an impeachment vote against them, whether it went through or not. It's just, they did it, so we're going to do it to them.
Trump is guilty of asking people to come to D.C. It'd be like me asking people to come over to my house. I'm not telling you to shit in my bed and steal my stuff.
Are you not?
Don't.
Never mind. Yeah.
It's the same concept. Like he asked people to come, but he did not tell people to go commit. Breaking into the Capitol. And that proof doesn't exist, or we would have seen it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
For the people that say don't trust this guy or don't trust that guy, don't trust any politician. That's what our country was founded on.
RD or I, whatever's in front of it. If it's a representative running, don't trust him.
Yeah, and also too, don't trust me, right? You can go Google this whole stuff yourself. Go look at January 2017 and 2016. Go look at PBS right before the election, right? These things are out there. You don't have to trust anything that I'm saying. This is straight up facts. Just go check it out yourself. And that, I think, is the difference here. The Democrats are saying, believe what I'm saying, not what I'm showing. And I'm saying, believe what's being shown. Don't believe what I'm saying. Find it for yourself.
Yeah, well, this has been an interesting panel for sure, an interesting discussion. I appreciate. Let me read some super chats because there have been a couple, and we need the support because we're getting definitely throttled by our friends, I'm sure. So let me just put the super chats on screen. Make sure I've got them all. If I missed yours, I'm sure you'll let me know. I've been trying to flag them as we go. All right, so here we go. Not a banned account asks, when can the Republican Party be held responsible? I don't know. For what is the relevant question? If you mean politically, then by voting. If you mean legally, then by them showing something they did illegal. That would be how. House of Tranquility and Low Expectations. Why did that automotive case even become before the court? How does American jurisdiction even apply? Oh, because there's issues with the arbitration. Because the parties, because one of the parties to the lawsuit is American based. I forget what the name of the company was. It was in the title of the caption of the case, but they're an American company based in Detroit. That's a part supplier. And as part of their deals and contracts, they got involved in, because obviously there's international trade, international relationships. One of the disputes they signed on to, one of their contracts dealt with this foreign thing, and they wanted some discovery or some sort of process in the U.S. as part of that. So that's how you got involved with the U.S. The U.S. Getting that, and then you had to find out, because there is a process in place for some sort of discovery if the foreign entity in question is a foreign tribunal, so that you can get information as part of your discovery process. But this wasn't a foreign tribunal. So that's how it came into play, was with asking a U.S. court for this specialized procedure on the basis it was a foreign tribunal, but it wasn't. So that's how that came to be. Pixel Me gave $10. Thank you for the sticker. Soy Mafia said, Giroli toast for you three. And what's your comfort food? I don't know. It depends what I'm craving at that particular moment. I don't know if I have a go-to. Drew said, hey, Kurt, hope you have a brilliant day. Great commentary. Thank you. Wazapalooza, the drunk, said, this is hilarious. I've never heard testimony through committee because I've never heard a witness testify to anything last week. I'm not sure you really heard him testify to much this week, and this is going to be paranormal, unfortunately. Britt said, Uncivil, don't you know that listening to crazy will rot your brain like sugar rots your teeth? Something doesn't kill you, make you stronger. I don't know. $20 from Peter. Hey, Kirk, can you cover the Kemp decision that came out today? I skimmed it and read Gorsuch's dissent. It's spicy. Might well do, because Gorsuch is definitely the one I like the most. Doesn't mean I always agree with him, but he's definitely the one I like the most. So
8-1.
Yeah, 8-1. Not a banned account said, how do we know the investigation to election 2020 wouldn't affect anything while refusing to investigate or give standing to those cases? Well, I mean, to just put it fairly, I mean, standing is a legal issue, and I'm a lawyer, so I'm here to talk to you about the law. So I read the decisions. I read half of them. I couldn't find any one of them I disagreed with. Standing is part of the law. I don't know what you want from me. It's like, I only know what I can prove, and I have to follow the process, a legal process that was established well before this election. It's not like something we invented for this. This process is something we're supposed to follow in all cases. So we don't do ad hoc in law, or we try to avoid it.
And there was an investigation, right? We were hearing the results of the investigation. That's why Bill Barr came out and was like, all this is BS, because his team was investigating it. So to pretend like there was no investigation, that's just not true. And the standing issue, when you go through 60, it's funny because anytime you go through 60-something cases and lose all 60-something, generally you'd say, well, that person didn't have anything, right? Because we're not talking about all in one court. We're talking about across the country, Michigan, Florida, Georgia, all these different places around the country. They lost them all. So unless you're saying the entire, even in Trump states, even with
Trump judges, as it was noted,
yeah. So unless you're saying the whole system is that corrupt, then again, I think you just don't want to see the truth. The truth is he lost. That's the truth.
Not a banned account says Trump was surprised and angry. Illegal. We got him. That does seem to be part of the argument.
That seems the argument.
Not a banned account. Giuliani violated the 18th Amendment that night. Don't we all? Don't we all? That's very cute. 18th Amendment is the one that prohibits drinking, by the way, for those of you not playing along at home. Andrea says, when are we going to get to January 6th? You know the reason for the hearing? Yeah, it's not happening. Shampasta says, could the votes be pledges by any chance? Elena says, for £20, Can we talk about the insurrection? No, I continue to need to tell you how bad the Orange Man is. Whopper WH07P said, just checking in. Have I missed anything? Not really, no. Arain said, what could be counted as credible evidence? Well, an eyewitness to Trump doing some sort of illegal thing, or documentations, or recording, or, the typical things that would count as credible evidence. That this seems like, or if you're going the other way in terms of the lawsuits, the exact same thing. Testimony, evidence. Yeah, it's just, no.
But what do we have now? Right now, we have the evidence that we have now is that Trump told people to come to Washington to let their voices be heard and peacefully protest. He actually literally said those words, go and peacefully protest, right? So he actually said that. So we have that. So they did ask people to come to Washington, right? They had the event. They went to the Capitol. They assumed that there would be security just like it's in every presidential election and every time they do it. And the security wasn't there and things got out of hand. So unless they can show where he said, where Trump and his team said, we're going to get people to go there to take over the building and do all that stuff, that's where you got me. But right now, we don't have that. We have Trump saying, come and protest and let your voices be heard, and let's see if we can convince them to change their votes to give me the presidency back, right? I think he can do that, but I don't think you have any evidence of him saying, and let's go take over the building and do it by force. That's the part that we need.
And inviting people to come and protest and do those things isn't inciting a riot.
No.
It's two completely different things. So you can have people, you have people that organize protests all the time,
yes.
Right? So you have people that come and protest. It doesn't mean that you are telling those people to go and riot and damage property and do all these things.
No, those are different things.
They're different things. And I think, I don't want to speak for everyone on here. I don't support or condone anything that happened that day for those individuals that broke into the Capitol and did some of the stuff.
No, I've done my 58-part series. They can all go to jail.
Yeah,
That's fine.
They can go to jail. They broke the law. But I also respect the facts and the laws that we have in this country. And if you're going to do these kinds of things, produce evidence of what this person did. And I haven't seen it.
Absolutely. I like this chat from Tiffany. The First Amendment doesn't cover lies. You should know that, legal advices.
Does.
Tiffany. The First Amendment covers lies.
It does. It absolutely does.
Lie, 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 lie. Lie about your birth date.
Yeah.
Amber Heard got away with it for a long time.
Weight.
Yeah.
Lie about your credit card number when it's getting late. Yes, you can lie. The First Amendment does protect the lies.
Not all lies, but it does protect lies.
No, not all lies. Yeah, but the First Amendment does protect the lies. If it didn't protect lies, well, we'd all be screwed.
Yeah. Truth is a defense. It's the difference between truth being a defense and not a prerequisite. Truth is a defense, not a prerequisite.
Yes, exactly so. From WHO7P, fully caught up. Thanks, you're welcome. Charles LePage said, Hillary Clinton said Biden should never concede and fight the 2020 election. I seem to vaguely recall statements along those lines, yes. And from Q Squared, $5. I do agree with the guy in the bottom left who lives in Korea. The real problem is the process of electing candidates. The rot is DNC and GOP. Might well be. It might well be.
I just think it's sad that the people who are very qualified for the job want nothing to do with the process.
Of course not, yeah. Because it's not the person who gets up top is the person who's most popular. It's not the person who's most qualified.
Arian says the election. There was testimony in a very technical sense, yes, sort of, but mostly it was just the committee members testifying. I mean, you didn't even really need the witnesses there. They were just complete props. It was basically, what's your name? And here's some things. Do you agree? Yep. Great. Thanks. Moving on.
It's like on Friday, they're like, well, you saw that meeting. That meeting, that meant that they were conspiring to do these things. I mean, they're telling them what they answer. It's so frustrating.
That's the Amber Heard defense, right? Any evidence we showed is enough evidence for us to win. And that's just not the case. Evidence is tested, right? So they have somebody testify, but if they don't testify to something that is material, then so what, right? Amber Heard had people testify. She had all this testimony, right? And she testified. That's evidence, but when compared to the reality of what happened, that testimony and that evidence wasn't sufficient. And even in this case right now, I haven't even gotten the evidence to even so I can get to the point where I can say Trump is guilty of any crime. I haven't even gotten that.
I just have fun envisioning these pictures of germaphobe Donald Trump having some sit down with a bare-chested, painted-up dude with a big buffalo hat on about how to overthrow the government.
We need you to go there. This is crazy. Well, listen, guys, I have to run because I got some videos I got to shoot and some children I have to pick up. This has been fun like crazy.
This has been fun. If you have enjoyed this content, please remember to like, subscribe, all the rest of it. Let me know. I do appreciate the super chats. We'll see what it does in terms of the channel and things like that, because I don't know whether or not this content is good or not. But I do appreciate all the members who are here for the entertainment along the way. I want to and ask my guests where we can find them. So Nate the Lawyer, start with you. Where can we find you?
Oh, just Google Nate the Lawyer, put it in the YouTube search, and my channel will come up, and hopefully you'll enjoy my videos. I got the videos obviously coming out today with January 6th versus January 6th. So that's going to be interesting. It's true, and then you'll see how the media's using them both differently, and just some other stuff. More Amber. We're going to be watching Amber Heard's stuff tomorrow. She's, for those of you who don't know, she's doing a 1 hour sit down with Savannah Guthrie.
I did not know that. Are we live reacting to that bullshit?
Is that tomorrow? I'm 17th.
No, well, they put out the teaser today.
Oh, yeah,
Part
okay,
one's tomorrow. They're going to show that first half an hour tomorrow on today. Then they're going to do another half an hour on Wednesday. Then they're going to put the full hour out on Friday. So they gave
milk that bitch.
So tomorrow we're
Jeez.
doing
Oh, my
it.
God.
Wednesday we're doing it. And then Friday we'll watch the whole hour and laugh. And then that'll probably be it for.
Well,
for
are we
Amber
doing that
Heard,
on your channel, my channel? Oh,
I'm doing it on my channel. I don't, everybody else can.
Legal Vice, where can we find you?
YouTube, Legal Vices. Twitter, The Legal Vices.
Detective Seeds.
At Detective Seeds on Twitter, Detective Seeds on YouTube. I just started the Lori Vallow and Chad Daybell case. I'm taking people through what it's like to be a detective and investigate it, rather than just giving a recap.
If anybody needs a local Mormon resident expert, I'll volunteer.
Well, that would help. That would help with a lot. Yeah, Detective Seeds, did you find it a little bit suspicious when they flew to Hawaii for the wedding and the kids were nowhere to be found?
Not at all.
Not on
Seemed
the plane, and
sacrifice them.
Maybe they're with the grandma who called in for the wellness check. Maybe they're with her. These might be. I mean, I've never been a detective, but these seem like suspicious clues.
We call that a clue. But I went through and I got everything from Chandler Police Department. I've been in contact with folks in Idaho. I'm actually going out there for the trial. I'm going to be out there for probably 3 to 4 weeks.
You can be our man on the ground. That'd be fun.
Yeah, I've talked to members of the family. I text back and forth with Charles's mom a couple times a week, getting updates. They actually went to when Chad had an appearance last week that was closed off. So I'm very kind of detailed.
Do you understand the corkboard string thing in your head? Do you have that mental map of all the relationships between the people? Because I'm still working on it.
It took a while, but like in my streams, like we did the first one last week, kind of the start of Charles's case where the police were called and the shooting happened. I'm showing them a collection of evidence where the police stopped and where they should have continued. And then you guys are more than welcome, because I'd love to have an attorney come on and poke holes and talk about, when you see this case as a defense attorney, where you would have poked holes at in it. There's so much. Yeah, it's crazy. So yeah, it'll be good. People are enjoying it. We had a really good turnout for the first one. Next one's going to be Wednesday night at 6 p.m. Eastern time. So.
All right. Well, I'll thank my guests. I'll remember to pin them in the comment below when I'm done with this. And for the moment, I've been Uncivil Law. Until later, my friends, I hope all's well. Cheers and goodbye.
Bye.